First sweep coming up.
Big win for the Camelot Kings here, Dan. The Valkyries have done it not since week 2. It is the deicide for the Oni Warriors as they have pulled this game back from the brink.
But the rest of the Solar Scarabs follow up. Down go the Titan. And Lodbra's got the first. What a 1-2 punch from the Bolts.
The damage comes from the Leviathans until Zapman puts them down with the snipe.
Defend their Titan, and the Tartar is Titan. Send us on to a game 3.
The Jade Dragons have come to play. 5 kills in 7 minutes.
Well, happy Saturday and welcome everyone into the SMITE Pro League here, Season 8, of course sponsored by Alienware. And before we get too much into what the day is, I want to tell you a little bit more about the Alienware. You can go to smitegame.com/Alienware and on checkout use code SMITEAW to get a lot of discounts. Of course, our pros are playing on the Ryzen R10 desktops, and they're doing it right down the studio from us, and they're playing with the 25-inch 240Hz gaming monitors. You can go get your own, again, smitegame.com/Alienware, and use code SMITEAW on checkout. Do that and follow Alienware on Instagram and Twitter at Alienware, or at Alienware, just at Alienware. And then AlienwareArena.com is where you go to join the global community. There was a little bit of the fumble. I knew it was going to happen eventually. I just had to catch up to it. My name's Gormizer. Joining me on the desk here is going to be Mifflin, and we have a fun day laid out ahead of us. We have nothing but LAN matches set up, and some really good ones on top of it. We get the Bolts taking on the Leviathans, the Dragons, and the Scarabs. It just feels like nothing but fun happening today.
Gore, I'm so jealous, man. I don't get a chance to cast any of these. I'm going to be riding the desk all day, but maybe in the best position to just, lean back and watch the games. Yeah. I'm just like you guys at home.
Except you also get to say some words about the game sometimes. You can be the chat correspondent for today.
All right, chat.
You could,
I'll be your guys'
be the liaison
microphone,
right?
I guess.
Like when come in and have Mifflin's thoughts, but then also give the chat's thoughts. Like what would they? Well,
no, just chat's thoughts.
Just chat's thoughts.
Yeah.
Just filtered straight through. You're making your job even
Here,
easier.
I'll start right now. Keck W, Pepe D.
Start the games.
Yeah, start the game already. Channel points win. I'm popping off, dude.
Yeah, dude, you're in there. Wait, did you highlight a message though?
Who? -700 XD.
Look, well, no, -700. I only loaded on. Or I'm loaded on channel points. You call yourself a SMITE game fan? I only talk and highlight messages. Come on, you don't? Anyway, yeah, we're gonna have the Bolts taking on the Leviathans first here, and then Dragons taking on the Scarabs a little bit later today. Scarabs will have a doubleheader tomorrow. They have to play the Valkyries, and then the Warriors and the Kings round out the week here. As we have, I didn't even realize it, but the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of October, that lined up perfectly for the weekend as we transition into, as Dave was calling it, spooky season. Halloween is, what is that? On my mind already, because I like candy. And there's the standings. 3-0 right now are the Atlantis Leviathans. They only play each team once, and as of right now, they've knocked out 3. If they get a 4th, then it becomes much easier to theoretically go undefeated in this round-robin stage and make it to the group stage in the top 2.
But that undefeated streak might be on the line here today because, again, the Olympus Bolts are an incredibly dominant team. I mean, didn't they have the second longest win streak here in Season 8 just in that last phase? So keep your eyes open for this one. The Atlantis Leviathans might be looking dominant right now, but they've got a big test ahead of them.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what they're going to be able to accomplish because this team has been able to do a lot this year in the Olympus Bolts. Jake has been on the forefront of a lot of players' minds, mainly because he has been a lightning rod for picks and bans in a lot of these games. Yamoja has been a really large threat. I know me and Agro were talking about it, I think, a little bit yesterday, though, on the desk, which is maybe some question marks specifically around Jake's Geb, because we haven't actually ever seen him play Geb, I think.
No, I don't. It doesn't come to mind. You know what? Actually, I teamed with Awesome Jake, I think it was 2 years ago, and my man was jamming those Geb games. So, potentially, he still has it in the back pocket. I'm not just saying that because he's staring me down right now.
He's looking at you. I can't see him. He's on the other side of my shoulder.
He's super good. Never made a bad play in his life. Obviously, being a little bit glib, this dude makes bad plays all the time. Just not super consistently. Consistently great.
Can you say
occasionally
that?
Bad. I don't know, man. He's looking at me like he wants me to talk him up, and I just can't.
He plays well. What do you mean you can't?
I
they went on
can.
an 8-0 win streak at the beginning of phase 2.
What are you, an Olympus Bolts fanboy?
Somebody put their name in the post-game stats on the Reddit page as Olympus bots, and that was very funny to me.
When Olympus Dolts is right there, dude. Come on.
Olympus Dolts was the one, phase 1, phase 2, we got to see some memes thrown at them that way, because I think it was Tartar Sauce Titans was thrown the other side. But Olympus Bots is just kind of funny. It was a typo. It wasn't even intentional. It was just a typo. We missed the L.
I'm sure.
But Jake's been doing really well. The Emoja and a lot of those picks have been very solid. It's just the question now with the new meta, and of course things changing for the duo lane, how things are going to go. But you know what? We don't have to speculate on it. We've got Jake standing by, as we've alluded to already, for an interview.
As J-Mac, I got Jake here standing by. Man, they're throwing a little bit of shade over there. Mifflin saying you're throwing some bad plays. It's Mifflin specifically throwing some shade out there,
We're not
Jake.
the Dolts. We're the Brolts now, all right?
The Brolts.
What's up, bro?
So we're going from the goats to the Brolts now.
Yeah, we got the snapbacks.
That's a nice. Oh, you do have the snapback on. It does look pretty nice. You can get one for yourself at shop.smiteproleague.com. Get those Smite Pro League shirt or Smite Pro League hats. But Jake, new meta comes out here at 3.9. You had a week to kind of mess around with it. How's it looking here for the supports in this new meta?
So sitting in the back line is kind of good. So that's why like Geb, Kepler, and Sylvanas, you just
Right.
like the enemy team just like can't kill your carries, and that's like pretty good.
It's always good.
Yeah.
Make sure your carries stay alive. It's the kind of maybe the key to win. Do you think that's going to be the key to win here today against the Leviathans? What do you think it's going to take them out?
I think if Ven and Barra don't die, I think we're going to do pretty well.
Oh, I think that's a really good solution for you. Make sure your carries stay alive, and you probably won't lose that matchup. Had a little bit of a stumble against the Dragons. You've made some improvements up since that last little set, kind of getting ready to come here for this next LAN match.
So yeah, against the Dragons, kind of had the wrong meta, but we decided to not do what we did against the Dragons this week, this week. So yeah.
Well, hopefully those improvements will work for you. Good luck in your match. I'll let you go ahead and get set up.
Thank
We'll
you.
throw it back to the desk.
Wise words from Jake. As long as Vin and Barra don't die. Hey, admittedly, that was all factual. He chair one the hell out of that, right? If Vin and Barra don't die, we're probably going to do pretty well.
He's not wrong, right?
Exactly.
Jake essentially washing his hands of this game, saying, look, man, I'm going to do everything I can to keep these guys alive. If they die,
Olympus
that's not on me.
Bolts.
But if they live, we win.
I like the name change for them as well. I know they've been hitting the gym. Here's where things do change up, though. We have to look at the Leviathans, and specifically this matchup. Since for the year-wide, they're even, 3-3. They've each won, although I would say the most important one was the Phase 2 playoffs. The Leviathans were able to win that. Since picking up Zapman, first week they played with Zap, the Leviathans lost to the Bolts.
Okay.
1 week in. Otherwise, every matchup they've had versus the Bolts, they've won. Granted, they've gone very deep into the set. It went 3 games in Phase 2 and then 4 games during the playoffs. So they've definitely been able to hold their own, and it's been favoring them a little bit more often. And this is where matchups really become important, because as much as I like to talk about how I do and love watching Jake play Yemoja, I like watching Rong Yu play Yemoja even more, and Rong Yu is really the biggest threat, I think, on this team. He's one of the best supports, if not maybe the best support in the league.
Man, I remember back in like Phase 2 and Rong Yu was like jamming down the Ymir games. We'd always say, this is some of the best walls we've ever seen, and I think he still does have that capacity in his own right. But Rong Yu being such a multi-talented threat is so hard to lock down, right? Sure, you can lock in the Yemoja. He can play the Horus. The Ymir, obviously incredibly strong. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him go towards something a little bit more aggressive. The Serket recently has been pretty annoying from
For
this
both
team
of these
as well.
supports.
Yeah, this is going to be a pretty contentious game. I'd say that Rong Yu and Awesome Jake have very similar play styles. They're both practitioners of the annoying fist, if you would. They're going to go up and do whatever they can to make sure the enemy backline, the carries, aren't having fun. If you guys are OG Smite fans, you might remember the original master of the annoying fist, Jeff Hinla, was the first support ever, historically, this is in the Smite canon, to actually utilize auto attacks to be annoying. And I'd say that Rong Yu and Jake are keeping up with that trend. They're just going to go out there and make sure whoever they're lined up against is doing a little bit less damage to the carries.
I miss Jeff. I'm sure Barra could say the same thing, though. Admittedly, they teamed together for so long. And that's been the thing. We looked at it. It is the second year here for Jake, who has been playing, as well as for Rong Yu. And both of them have been a just storm to deal with. But the Leviathans, as a team, coalesce into something that is just what feels like not necessarily undefeatable, but just damn difficult to go up against a lot of these times. Really good drafts, and like you said, it's not just Rong Yu who has this ridiculously versatile god pool, although maybe a point of contention considering how much they overlap with what Jake plays. You've got to deal with that with the entire team. Can say the same overall about the Bolts. And after yesterday's win, I'm sure they're feeling happy. I didn't think they actually all had the hats, but they really do.
Yeah, no, they made sure.
I thought Jake was just trolling us.
No, dude, it's a real rebrand. You didn't get the memo.
No.
Oh, that's on me. I probably should have forwarded that email to you.
Shop.smiteproleague.com. Get yourself a hat.
No, those are shirts.
You can get the hats there too.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just.
And joggers.
It was
and mouse pads.
It was a callback.
There's also a onesie,
all right, whatever.
hooded blanket, that nice Leviathans
Are we
hoodie.
doing an ad right now?
I am.
Yeah, so go buy your
stuff.
shirts, your hats, your one.
If it says Smite Pro League on it as opposed to any team name, we get to keep our lights on.
Yeah, that's right. Make sure you're buying the Smite Pro League branded gear after you buy your team branded gear, or maybe before. What do you
Or
think?
both at the same time.
Same time. Expedited
Look,
shipping.
hey, I'm checking it. Well, actually, rent just happened because it's the first of the month. All right, so like 15th, you're ready, right? Paychecks come through. There you go, baby. 2 weeks.
All right, yes. So anyway, here's the thing about how the Atlantis Leviathans and the Olympus Bolts are playing against each other here in the studio today, and I'm super excited for it, and I'm not going to start talking about an ad again. Gore, you got any talking points?
Yeah, so let's talk about Zapman and joining this team, which is something I'm sure you might not want to talk too much about, but we're going to anyway.
Okay.
Because, again, they've been widely successful against this Bolts team since picking him up. This was a matchup. I'm going to give a shout-out. It's Dan Edits, I know, on Twitter. What is it? Betty Smite, I believe, on YouTube.
Yes,
Who had
sir.
uploaded a video not too long ago about a cursed matchup in Smite, and you'll never guess who the two teams were other than these two teams that we're about to watch. It has been historically in favor of the Bolts pretty much until recently. This year, things have been slipping slightly. Again, Phase 1, Week 1, we had a Leviathans win. Glance over that. Phase 1, Week 1 doesn't matter. Everything since then until a little bit of history, or I guess practice with Zap, has now gone the Bolts' way as well. And so hopefully the Leviathans, at least on their side, and of course their fans, are hoping that they can keep that streak going against this team. Jake's mean mugging us, so let's go ahead and get picks and bans.
You guys are talking too much on the desk.
What these teams are going to be able to go through. I anticipate, as much as I'd like to say a lot of support bans and things like that because of the two of them, I actually think we'll maybe see just the standard out of the two and maybe a Circat ban early on, but for the most part, I don't know that they're actually going to take that many shots.
Yeah, with the priority order as it lies for support being in line with Geb, Sylvanas, and Kepri, as Jake alluded to into his interview, I doubt we do see too many targeted bans in the support column. The Emirs of the past, the Horuses, not generally going to be looked at here. So instead, the Leviathans going to go ahead and ban the standard Odin. And on the other side, the Bolt's going to target out that Terra, both gods that have been very versatile and very strong here in Phase 3. Umoja as well kind of finds herself in that column. But when you're going for these very standard bans, it leaves a lot open still. Very recently, Tiamat's been working her way through the ban phase very often. Umoja has been as well, so the Bolt's probably happy with taking that one away. And there's the Tiamat gone, but still plenty out there.
Opens up things, you have to talk about it. Hell is at the top of that list for a reason. Ardio's at the top of that list, but the Kepri as well has been a very big point of contention. When you look at specifically these mid laners, but maybe even more so Venenu, the Morrigan, it joins that conversation, and it makes things, I think, a little more interesting for the Bolts and the Leviathans. It is as much to thwart what I said at the beginning. Nothing but support bans from the Bolts. Terra, Umoja, and the Kepri. It joins over there. You had mentioned the Tiamat, but the Odin alongside that with the Leviathans. It feels like a lot of control, but there's so much available. I mean, you have to look at the jungle picks that are available right now, what Lasber's been playing, what we've seen Jake play. The Uller still available, someone that we've seen controlled a lot. So Leviathans have a lot on their plate.
Yeah, the Leviathans might be looking to ban out the Raijin here. Paul, in his interview yesterday, said that Tiamat and Raijin still are the two best mid laners inside the game, but instead it is going to be that Circat. The Olympus Bolts not going to be allowed to take that one in their first slot, but are allowed to go towards their support of choice. And Geb locked in immediately. You said it a little bit earlier. We don't have a lot of data on awesome Jake's Geb, but I've got some faith in him to perform on this god.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you just kind of anticipate, hey, a good support playing a good Guardian in the game right now is, a good support playing a good support should theoretically add up to be a good support. I actually like that Circat ban, though, just because it feels like it targets Jake and Lasber at the same time. Although we saw Lasber playing a little bit of the Nike, does still let the Ardio through, who has been oppressive, but not winning so much lately.
No, she's been struggling a little bit to find the win column, because generally when you go towards that Ardio, I think it's inside of that first slot, and you leave a lot available to the other side, though the Leviathan's able to pick it up in second pick probably feels pretty good for them. And now they shore up that sustain that Artio is already affording your team through the Druid stance, now with Hell as well. That's a lot of sustain early on. The Bolts likely going to be taking their eyes towards the Onks, the Brawler's Beatsticks, and the Divine Ruins already.
Yeah, I don't know if everyone caught that at the bottom of the screen.
wow.
Hell has played 5 games so far this phase and has lost all 5 of them. That is not a very promising stat line to see it locked in. That being said, one of my memories of this Hell in Shinto's hands is a very early double kill. And of course, when you have something like Artio on one side like as a bodyguard, and then you get Wooler on the other, it feels like you've got nothing but strength on the side of the Leviathans. Nike and the Morgan get locked in here for the Bolts. They're going to start up the next round of bans. Leviathans take out the Cerberus as of right now to help both Artio and Hell. A lot of healing, as you had highlighted. But the Nike and the Morgan feels really good for the Bolts.
Yeah, it seems like the Leviathans are kind of hedging their bets, saying this Nike is likely jungle bound here as they do toss a ban towards that Cerberus, which is generally that soul lane god. Geb doesn't really have a whole ton of flex potential, no matter what the SEC might try and convince you of. Generally, this god is going to find himself inside a support.
In the way back when, though, Divios.
With the Geb solo,
and
or
it
like
was
Mando Warrior doing Geb
only
mid.
him.
Yeah, let's put him in support, and I think that's where the 408 is looking at taking themselves. But as of right now, the Olympus Bolts are lacking mightily in pressure. Nike doesn't really bring a whole lot of jungle pressure. Generally around level 6 or 7 is where she starts to hit her stride. Geb struggles a lot in the early game phase. It's very easy to shut down that god, and the Morgan obviously needs some items online before she can play that assassin style.
Yeah.
So I'm expecting the Bolts to try and pick up some sort of these bridge picks in these next 2 slots, whereas the Leviathans, I'd argue they've got pretty decent pressure already. Hell up against the Morgan is going to have clear advantage. She's not only going to deal a little bit more damage to the wave, but also healing her own, as well as poke advantage, I'd say, with that repulse ability. And then we don't need to talk about how strong and annoying Artio is inside of the soul lane. She's going to have just about all the fun that you could with that additional CDR of the blue buff and self-sustain. And then, you know, Uul scales really well with these new mace changes.
Yeah. We highlighted the Cerberus ban a little bit earlier. Cthulhu is banned alongside that from the Leviathans. The other side, the Bolts take some shots at Panatom, get rid of the Susano and the Erlong Shen. And this is another support that gets locked in here for the Leviathans that has been on the rise. If you're watching, I believe it was the Kings yesterday, enough to first pick it. Granted, the Bolts did win the game against this Sylvanas. But this Sylvanas has been on the rise lately, ban-worthy in some cases and first pick-worthy to some teams.
Yeah, that minor rework that he got to his first ability, giving you additional cooldown on all of your abilities, is just so nice.
The idea that I can pull you more often makes me happy.
Not just pull you more often, but heal your team more often, root everybody, go for the knock-up as well. This god is very versatile right now, but going for a third dedicated healer inside of your draft means that the Bolts, when they do pick up that anti-heal, when they do find that Onk, are going to find a lot of value with it as well. Sylvanas, it's incredibly hard to be choosy with who you're healing inside of these team fights. You use press 2 to apply damage.
Are you near me?
Yeah, you're getting healed. Cool. The same could be said of Hell. The same could be said of Artio as well. It's not a lot of single targets. So I think the Bolts are in a position where they could legitimately, A, pick up this Scotty. Hopefully, I see you get excited. Or B, as I was going to say, go towards multiple Onks and get full value from that passive.
Since it was banned against them however long ago, I've been waiting to see this, especially because in theory, with these item changes, like Scotty seems pretty good, right? I mean, Calder should be able to do more damage, but also just in general, Scotty should be able to do more damage. And also, Bear is kind of the only person that I anticipate playing Scotty ever in the Pro League. Maybe you could see Panda Cat whip it out every now and then. But alongside the set, you had kind of mentioned it earlier, that they thought the set where the Nike was going to go to the jungle, which is why you see the Cthulhu as well as the Cerberus. With set getting locked in, shifts that Nike more over to Haddix, doesn't it?
I think so.
Theoretically.
Nike could still potentially flex into the soul lane or the jungle, and as can set. So I'm not willing to bet fully on this one, but if I had to, I'd say it is a little bit more likely that we see set within the jungle. But looking at this draft right now, the Olympus Bolts are going to struggle up against this Hun bots that just got locked in by the Leviathans. Fear No Evil is such a great tool to lock in some of these more immobile gods. The Morgan, you go into that stealth, you're not teleporting, you're not jumping anywhere, you're kind of stealth right next to the clone. Fear No Evil is going to knock you out of that every single time. Scotty, sure, you get a little bit of additional movement speed thanks to that permafrost, but I don't know, Sacred Monkey plus Elite plus Fear No Evil being the size of a lane means it's going to be pretty easy to lock her down as well.
Now, here's the thing I think that's really funny, and Hunbats is maybe the point where you could argue this the most, but, like, we always joke about the Leviathans just kind of playing the tier list, like, you know what their draft is going to be. This feels kind of like that, right? Like, admittedly, you'd probably want Geb over Sylvanas, and there's a couple of changes up, but otherwise, like, Artio, Uller, Sylv, Bats Hell all feel like they just kind of looked at what was like, hey, 8.9, what's great? Yeah, lock that in.
Yeah, they load up the Reddit tier list. Oxy, the coach, has Reddit up at all times, hops on r/SmitePro and says, oh, this is what people are complaining about. Let me go ahead and lock that one
That's
in
our
for the
team,
boys.
baby.
Yeah. And we're going to run it, and we're going to keep running it until they ban it. And that seems to be the Leviathan strategy year in and year out.
Now, I want to know, because we've seen a few of these matchups, like we've gotten to see, I think, Sylvanas Geb so far this year. Nike's been an interesting point, and I think that versus Artio is something that's really interesting. But Uller and Scotty is really the one, like you had mentioned what happens to Hunbats if he comes over to that lane, but like in the one-on-one, Uller's just kind of been deleting people. Zap has been the herald of deleting people with that Uller pick. Is Scotty going to be able to exist? Is Barra going to have a good time at all this game?
Both of these guys are playing very high kill pressure hunters, so if Scotty is able to pull a lead, she could do the exact same thing to Uller as he will. I mean, it's going to be a little bit harder to perform on. You probably want to work through that leap first, but afterward, I mean, the Calder changes in Season 8, now making it a little bit easier to apply that damage is going to help out a lot. She's also going to benefit from that exact same build. The Transcendence, the Maestry does work out very well on the Scotty, so if Barracuda is able to pull a lead, I think this Ull might be in a little bit of hot water. But that said, if we're talking about ease of play, the Ull is going to have an advantage here. I mean, you land the axe, you land the bladed arrow, the hail of arrows, and all of a sudden your opposition isn't there anymore.
So Zapman's just kind of cruising. Like it's not necessarily autopilot, but things should go well for him. We'll see what the Scotty and the rest of the Bolts have to offer here. They've lost the last two matches versus the Leviathans. Let's see if they can change that around.
Should be a big matchup here again in the studio between these two teams, the Bolts and the Leviathans, here for game number 1. It's J-Mac and Aggro with Doug on the spectator bringing us the action and seeing a Scotty come out here in game number 1. Always a good feel, especially when you see Barra kind of flex his god pool just a little bit.
Is it a good feel, though, J-Mac? Are
It's
we
always good to
really Scotty fans?
I'm not going to say I'm a Scotty fan, but I am going to say that I am a fan of seeing new things pop out in these roles.
I agree with that, but maybe Scotty could be the exception to the rule.
I'm just kind of a notorious Scotty hater. I think that
Got hit by one too many Calder roots?
Yeah, maybe it's that. Maybe it's just that I don't know how good this god really is in an organized environment. I think that even when Scotty was at her best, and she had a couple of metas way back when where she was really strong, and she could be again. I mean, with the build that is popular these days, it should be now, right? That she's pretty good. But I think in comparison to a god like Uller, I feel like Zapman should just be slamming in this lane, but Barra picked this lane matchup, which is telling to me. So we'll see if he can manage it well.
I mean, you can throw the dog at if you expect he's going to be getting an axe toss. Now Calder eats the axe, so you don't have to worry about the stun. Could see some counterplay between it. We'll see how the matchup goes, but seeing a 10th pick Hunbats after the performance that it had yesterday for the Kings, a little surprised that he was made it all the way this far in the draft. Surprised to see there isn't more priority, honestly, in maybe banning that god away. Sure, it lost. But when Captain Twig was able to get into those team fights, get those 2-3-man Fear No Evils, this Hunbats looked nigh unstoppable.
It was very good in those moments when it wasn't getting 1v1 by Lasbra. But overall, I think that Hunbats is in a very strong place. But for Captain Twig, it makes sense. I mean, that is a god that he's played a ton of in his career. I do not think of Panatom as a traditional Hunbats player. You know, Panatom usually a little bit more prevalent towards the Daji, the Susano. Those are kind of the hard carry gods you'll see Panatom take. But I think that Hunbats is this really nice mix of early game setup, and really using Fear No Evil to set up for your mid laner in particular, but wherever you're going, just using it as a gank tool, and then becoming this hyper carry later on. I think that's something that kind of gets lost sometimes for the general viewer base, is that Hunbats is one of the best 1v1 assassins late game. It is really easy to win your duels. Now, it's unfortunate that Twig went up against maybe the best 1v1 assassin late game in Daji yesterday, but I think that he should be able to outperform Lasbra once they get to fully built items.
We talked a lot about the supports on the desk. Let's talk a little bit about the supports in their builds. Sentinel's Gift has kind of been the go-to ever since we saw the change to Benevolence. Now we're seeing the reworked Benevolence kind of make its way back into some of these builds. We've been seeing a little bit of flexibility with that. Occasionally we've seen the War Flag come out, though that a little bit less so. Now we do have the new and reinvented Benevolence out here for both of our supports today.
I think Benevolence is in a pretty good spot. I mean, it brings you some extra sustain. It incentivizes you to leave the lane and do some roaming, which is always a really good thing at this level. I think that, you know, it really just comes down to a math equation that I haven't done, in the fact that I think we saw
2 benevolences yesterday in the Bolts Kings matchup, and now again 2 benevolences again today. Tells me that someone's done the math, and they've come up with the fact that Benevolence is just a little bit better. I think that also the way that the upgrades go matters quite a bit, and Compassion just really, really strong, especially when there's going to be a lot of magic damage on the other side, and because you get incentivized to build more magic defense, the damage that you're getting from Compassion gets converted to magical damage. So if you're, say, Awesome Jake, and you see 3 magical damage dealers on the other side, you can build a little bit more magic D, and then build the Compassion and feel like you're getting paid on it.
One thing I know that Hinduman was kind of going off about was the fact that we're not seeing as many blinks in the support, especially with gods like Geb and Sylvanas who have great blink initiations. We've been seeing a lot less of it. Well, Awesome Jake will go towards a blink for his first relic. Wrong You will pick up the shell to get a little bit of extra defense for the Leviathans. Now that Panatom's hit level 5, could be looking to make a gank here in this dual lane. Baron Jake still level 4. Knockup goes through and a leap in by Zapman. Panatom waiting for the initiation. Goes in with the blink, fear no evil, and that's easy pickings for the jungler. A sick pull by Wrong You grabs Jake right back in, and a kill their way. Double in the dual lane. Leviathans on the board.
Perfect opportunity to get that gank. Not a lot of ward vision, and by a lot, I mean literally any on that left-hand side for the Bolts. Bera's Vision Shard just coming back up. Didn't get an opportunity to drop it in time, and it's just perfect timing from Panatom to come over, and that could not have gone any better. You get the first blood for Panatom, you get the beads for Barracuda, because now Zapman has solo kill potential because he's going to be able to spike and buy this Jotun's Wrath right off the rip. Really great start there from the Leviathans.
And Wrong You's able to pick up a Ward Chalice for himself and the Lotus Crown as a first item. So now there's going to be even more protections when he can get those heals off. Not that they even really needed it. In that last little fight, that was just all damage. A great ultimate placement by Panatom. Shoved Barracuda right against the wall, and there was nowhere for him to run. Now maybe looking for a pincer against Panatom. Skewer comes out, and the Ren from Haddix doing some good damage. Panatom gets his leap back just in time, but Venenu will chase him down and get the kill with that Dark Omen.
Don't think Panatom realized how in trouble he was, but even by the time he used that jump, he was never going to survive.
Hardcore going to take away that Scorpion and maybe take a life too. Lasbra uses the beads, but it's all in vain. Shinto picks up a kill for the mid lane. Haddix gets pushed back under the tower, and he'll end up losing his blue buff because of it. A lot of early skirmishes here by these teams right up in the 5-minute mark.
A little lackadaisical there by the Bolts. I mean, they get that pick on a Panatom, and they're thinking, okay, well obviously no one's going to come in and contest this. Well, they aren't really concerned about saving their abilities for burst. They get a little lazy on it and instantly stolen away. Nearly done the same there on this left-hand side, but Zapman just a bit too early with that Hail of Blades.
A little too early to get that, so it'll be a Scorpion split by the looks of it. One for Leviathans on the right side, one for the Bolts on the left side. Haddix will take a little bit of damage here from Hardcore, but nothing he's too worried about. He's got a tier 1 for safety, and even with Panatom's ultimate back online, that is a tall task to try and kill a Nike even this early in the game. No beads, however, to note for the solo laner. It is a blink on board for Haddix, so if he could catch him out, could be big. Wrong You looking for a pull just off the mark. Barracuda safe under that tower.
Yeah, but that's the problem, is that Barra has to dance that edge really carefully, because if that pull lands, if that root lands at any point, Wrongyu is just going to set up an easy kill for Zap. That's one of the problems with this Scotty pickup, is the Sylvanas root becomes pretty lethal for you right away. You can actually toss out the permafrost and slide them to the side as you get rooted, and oftentimes it'll throw off their aim, but I don't know. I'm not really counting on Wrongyu trying to miss a pull at any given point.
Yeah, Wrongyu's been playing the game for a little while, been playing this god for a little bit. Pretty sure every support has a solid Sylvanas in their kit at some point, so missing those pulls, especially on a rooted target, not something you're going to see too often. We are going to try and get right back into this game, and because we can, just a quick little pause in the action.
Yeah, overall, I mean, a great start, though, for the Leviathans. I mean, they're off to a fairly good gold lead, experience leads in a lot of places as well, even though there was that one kill onto Panatom. That first blood, it was nearly a 2,000 gold lead that early for the Leviathan. So not only are they winning those little skirmishes like we saw, but getting a few more of these neutral camps, getting some pressure. Shinto has a level lead in mid and has been under zero pressure this whole game, which is really the ideal scenario for a Hell. So this is a great start for the Leviathans.
Yeah, a little bit of a slip up by the Bolts, so they were able to get that nice little pick early on, and then immediately thought, okay, well, we got the pick. Absolutely no worries. Let's just go ahead and start taking some of the stuff on the map. Problem is that Hardcore is still standing around here on this RDO, and if there's one person I don't want to see on RDO, it's probably Hardcore, because he's the one who brought this god back in the meta. There is a reason why this god has a 100% pick ban rate. A lot of it's because of this guy.
Yeah, he was really dominant on the going into playoffs and everything like that, so no surprise to see him go back to it in this instance. I do want to bring up what Mifflin was saying, though, on the desk, which is that the Leviathans may have over-indexed into healing, really giving a lot of value to the bolts whenever they buy their anti-heal, and that's something that I'm always very cognizant of, and I think that Mifflin brought up that great point. Cursed Ankh is going to get a ton of value. I mean, every Divine Ruin, every Baller's Beat Stick is going to be really, really big for the bolts. So the Leviathans getting this early lead, normally with healer comps, it's like, oh, it's a healer comp. They don't need to be ahead early. I kind of think they do with how much healing they have.
Yeah, it is a bit of a ticking time bomb when it comes to that healing, when it comes to the late game, and how they can adjust to that. We are going to take it to a quick break, and then we're going to try and get you guys back in just as soon as we can. So able to get right back into the game. Not a whole lot much else has happened across the board. We're just hitting that 10-minute mark. Bolts and Leviathans. Leviathans up on that 3-1, but notably about a 3,000 gold lead they've been able to make for themselves so far.
Yeah, apologies about that. Seems like we did have a bit of a spectator issue, but the players were able to keep on playing, so we jump in with where they are live. So it looks like we did, as you said, J-Mac, we did not miss a whole lot. The Leviathans have continued to keep this gold lead about stagnant where it was, but haven't gotten any more kills, have hit a couple of key power spikes. I mean, level 13 there for Shinto. Is that man, no fear from Jake's Cataclysm, holds on to the beads, and rightfully so. Barra just too far away to follow up. Some good presence of mind there from Zap.
Yeah, Barra so far back just trying to get those minions, so there was no follow-up potential there from the Cataclysm out of Awesome Jake. And Rongi rotates over just to give Zap a little bit of extra health and get him back up to full in this lane matchup. No lifesteal just yet in either of these Hunter builds, mostly just going for their straight damage. We see a Jotun's Wrath on one side, a Transcendence Rush on the opposite, and maybe looking to pick up the opposite for both of them whenever they do make their chance to go back to base.
And that means that Barra, if he finishes Jotun's, is actually going to be ahead in itemization because he'll have finished his stacking whenever Zapman is just getting started on his. So if that is the case, if it is Transcendence there for Zap, I feel like you've got to be feeling really good if you're Barra. I mean, you took that first blood at level 4, and it looks like he hasn't really gotten bullied enough in this lane. Zap maybe not able to play as aggressively as he would like, and usually when that happens, it's because the jungler is doing a good job staying out of vision and staying off the map, and that will kind of hold the enemy ADC in place and prevent them from being super aggressive. So some of that credit may deserve to go to Lasbra more than anyone else.
Well, going back to base, the Barracuda does pick up a Crusher, so a little bit of extra attack speed, some extra power, and Haddix, he'll get stunned out by Hardcore, but he's not too deterred. Pops the Sentinel of Zeus, walking forward towards Panatom. He's got some backup from Jake and Venenu, and even Lasbra sitting here in the lane. Rongu goes in, gets a double ultimate, pulls Venenu, a quick stone shield from Jake, gets him out of danger, and a Fear No Evil from the jungler will push everybody away, but it's Lasbra who's in danger. A Cataclysm holds him in place, but Panatom will teleport right in and take down Lasbra. One more for Leviathans, but the Venenu is able to trade it off and take out the jungler. Now it's Venenu in danger. Our core chases him out, and Shinto picks him up.
Shinto able to grab him. Haddix coming right back around, but he doesn't have a whole lot of buttons available. And that'll do it. It's a 2-for-1 for the Leviathans on this right side of the map, and including a blue buff invade. Lasbra was able to get some good space creation there, and I thought Jake was really patient with a lot of his abilities, had a really good stone shield. Ven used the beads at the same time, so a bit of unfortunate timing there between those two, but his Cataclysm was good. He had a really good knock-up later on in that fight, but it just was a little bit too disjointed. Lasbro went in before Venenu could make that transformation and get in alongside him. And I think that there was a window there where the Leviathans were low on cooldowns. You know, the Wisps had already gone out. Shinto had already used his buttons. That's really where your opportunity lies when you've got this type of double set composition plan where you want Lasbro and Venenu to go in. You kind of want Lasbro to go in first, or Venenu, it doesn't really matter. You want one set to go in first, get all those cooldowns out, and then be able to stay in the fight as the next one comes in. And Ven just got in there a little bit too late. And by the time that Ven went in, all the cooldowns are coming back up from the Leviathans.
And with it, the Leviathans have a 5-2 lead on the kills, 13.5 minutes in, and a little under 4,000 gold in their favor. Experience sitting around that 5,000 mark. You can see that slight difference as far as the mid laners are concerned. You do see the Hell level 15 versus the level 14 on Venenu. Even Zapman getting about even here against the Scotty. Barracuda is, even despite falling for that first blood much earlier on, is managing to stay within the same realm of experience as Zapman, making sure to kind of keep a little bit of parity there in that duo lane.
And like I said, he's kind of ahead in this itemization battle, but not for long. I mean, Zap's sitting on heavy mace. Barra doesn't, just now backs to buy it, but Zap is at 42 stacks, so he's a wave away now that he's at 45 from fully stacking that Transcendence and bringing that lane back to a pretty even state when it comes to the itemization. But I still think that Barra getting out to level 14 with only that first blood death because of Panatom's gank is a win for the Bolts. You know, I imagine that the Bolts are kind of counting on him when it comes to these team fights to be able to make a pretty big impact, and they're going to need him to. I mean, they're down 5,000 gold at 14 minutes. It's a pretty hefty lead right now for the Leviathans, and they still have all that sustain, which is usually very hard to fight whenever you're behind. But the Bolts haven't hit level 12 for Jake yet. I think they really need a Cursed Ankh. Actually, Haddock has already bought it when he hit 12, so that's really big. If the Leviathans make a mistake and get two grouped and get hit by Ankh plus Venenu damage plus Lasbro damage, they have no healing. I mean, they're literally over 100% anti-healed, and they're taking more damage because of the Ankh. So the Leviathans need to be wary of. Normally we would group and just try and deathball with a big healing composition like this, but you really can't with how with how much they have and how the Bolts have itemized.
I think it is important to note out there that Haddock's not only picked up the Cursed Ankh, but it is the upgraded version immediately, so that extra 500 gold will get a ton of value instantly because, as you highlighted, if they heal at any point during that activation of it, they are going to take that increased damage. Wrong, you just trying to go for some cheeky pulls against Awesome Jake under tower, but not much further to be gained there. Awesome Jake still hasn't been able to hit 12 himself, so his second relic not available. Hardcore blinks against Venenu in the mid lane. Venenu trying to get under the tower, but there are 5 Leviathans staring him down. There's nowhere for the mid laner to go. Shinto credited with the kill.
That's one of the best ways to combat the Morrigan, is just get in her face with a tanky frontliner right away, and Yarkor's lack of hesitation proves huge. I mean, this is going to guarantee a free Gold Fury for the Leviathans. And now you're in the position as the Bolts that you've got to decide where we're going to put our foot in the sand. I mean, you've got to draw a line at some point and say, this is the objective we have to defend. But you never get a chance to do that if you keep getting picked, just like we saw there. So that's a big play by Yarkor. And now those big stands, those last final moments potentially, become harder and harder to execute upon by the Bolts.
Haddock still leaped into the mid lane, and they'll take a little bit of damage there from Shinto, even with this Breastplate of Valor. That Soul Reaver and Doom Orb combo that Shinto has picked up early gives him plenty of early game power and a little bit of extra defense, some cooldown reduction sitting at 30%. Interesting that both of these mid laners have gone for the Doom Orb. Typically, that's kind of been reserved for more of just the Morrigan, kind of an exclusive here, but Shinto getting it for a little bit of extra movement speed and mostly just a ton of power on that item.
A ton of power and a ton of MP5 as well, which Hell really loves. So all those things fit very well for her. If he's going to be going Breastplate right afterwards, which I like, up against a composition that's going to be doing heavy physical damage. I'm actually very surprised, Rung, you didn't go Sovereignty in the second slot. I think it's a bit greedy for him to have to go Bulwark in that slot. Think that Sov would have been a huge boon for Shinto and Zap in particular, but seems like they're A-okay with just the Lotus Crown and the Wisps protections they're going to be getting. It's worth noting, J-Mac, yesterday Twig was really ahead of Lasbro in at least one of those two games. I feel like it might have been both that he was able to pull pretty far ahead in XP. And again, it's happening in this game where Panatom is 2 levels up on Lasbra and 2 levels up in the mid lane for Shinto. So, you know, it's a couple of really good teams with good early games that have happened, but still, I think that is something to note going forward for the Bolts, is that their mid trio, I mean, they're down 6 levels collectively between the 3 of them. That's not a good spot to be in. That's something to keep your eye on, is how well are these guys farming.
Oh, pull, waiting for Rongyu. Haddix is able to leap away. Awesome Jake got to go back to base, and he'll pick up a second upgraded Curse Song. So they've now got, what is that, 16 full seconds of anti-heal and extra damage they can get if there is any kind of healing going through. A pull from Rongyu against Haddix will make sure to put him in an interesting spot. The barrier will push them away and deal a little bit of damage, but the Leviathans just setting up for these objectives. The Pyromancer about a minute away from spawning in. The Fire Giant still in the wheelhouse, but the Leviathan's not going to take a risky pull just yet. And Lasbra going for a very interesting rotation over the top. Thought he was going to go between both those towers, but instead seeing Zapman there, maybe thought twice about it.
I like the patience the Leviathan are showing right now, though, J-Mac. I mean, it would be tempting. You've got all 5 there. We're right next to the Fire Giant. We might as well pull it in that instance, but they make the right decision by not, because I think they need to wait for Zap to hit level 20, get that Bumba's Spear, and then they can start actually putting threat on Fire. As it stands, their DPS is just too low on that objective, so they make the right decision. Don't try and force it. Don't allow the Bolts back in this game because of a silly mistake. Because what power spikes are the Bolts hitting in the next 2.5 to 3 minutes that really scare you? They've finished all their most recent items. Jake should have a lot of gold in hand because he hasn't even started his 3rd item, but probably not enough to finish a 3rd item anyways. Overall, I don't think the Bolts are really that close to finishing a big power spike item and changing the course of these fights, whereas the Leviathans are. They've got a Bumba Spear about ready to go. Should be a Pendulum of Ages soon enough for Shinto. They're close to these level 20 power spikes. Not only the Bolts behind in that aspect, but even if they sink 1,500 gold into upgrading their starters, Leviathans have more items anyways. So if they're both upgrading starters, it'll end up with the Leviathans having finished 4th, 5th items, whereas the Bolts will not. So I think that the Leviathans are making the right call based on the economy of the game.
Jake didn't really have a whole lot of gold in hand. Was only sitting on about 1,000, so he goes back up and picks up that tier 1 gem, going towards that Prid win early on. On the opposite side of the board, you look at Rongyu. He's got a fully picked up Relic Dagger, so he's going to have more Sunders, more shells, a lot quicker, and looks like that is an upgraded shell, so even more damage mitigation for the rest of his team. Shinto has hit level 20, so he can pick up that Pendulum anytime that he wants to, going back to base. The Obsidian Shard fully completed, and I'm still looking at this major level deficit even within the jungle, 2 levels. I mean, Panatom is very close to hitting his level 20 power spike, and the fact that he's got a Heartseeker online, and you're looking over on the other side with Lasbra trying to get towards that Heartseeker, not the funnest spot for the Bolts to be in.
No, certainly not. I mean, Barracuda has got to be the saving grace now for the Bolts, right? I mean, every fight has gone the Leviathan's way, but Bear has been in the fewest of them, only in that first engagement where he was level 5. You know, obviously not his strong point of the game. He's the one that's closest in XP. He's the one that's closest in itemization. And that's a lot of weight to put on a lone Scotty and a little dog friend, but I just don't see a way that the Bolts are going to change the course of these team fights with the way that they've been going, besides Barra actually being able to kill Yarkor whenever he dives in.
Setting up around the Oni Fury, Leviathans will pull it immediately. Rongyu and Zapman, the only ones here to start it out. Jake, Lasbra, and Barra rotate over, and that will be just enough for the Leviathans to pull away from it. Just kind of just doing a check, just to, you know, pull the Fury, see who shows up. They see 3 members of the Bolts. They say, all right, now we know where everybody's at on the map. We know how quick their response time is. They pull away, and are able to just kind of reset the momentum of the game yet again. But we're sitting at a 9,000 gold lead for the Leviathans, probably even more there as far as experience is concerned. But as we start hitting the level 20s across the board, they're going to be a little less worthwhile. But again, Leviathans go right back to the Gold Fury. They see that some of the Bolts went back to base, and that's an easy, quick pull for them. Oni Fury goes the way of the Leviathans to further extend that lead. 9,500 gold, almost 11,000 experience.
But now this is where they've got to put their money where their mouth is. I mean, 10,000 gold in the lead at 22 minutes. You've got Oni waves pushing on these side lanes. There should be no reason why the Leviathans aren't grouping up and pulling fire right now, because these Oni waves are going to get them value on these side lanes. The Bolts aren't going to be able to answer this left side wave at the very least, but you can force them to fight you and let your map advantage kind of materialize in an easier to see way. Leviathans just wasting a bit too much time, in my opinion. Desynced on their backs. Could have been here much earlier.
Well, they'll start at the Fire Giant. Left side wave pushing in. Fire Giant down to almost half health already. It's only Haddix at the front line of the Fire Giant pit to try and answer back. Venenu sneaking around the backside of the pit. Might be looking for a gank. Might be looking for just some nice picks against him. He'll be spotted out by Hardcore. He'll be stunned out, slowed down, forced the transformation into Fear No Evil just to get him out of danger. That's a huge cooldown expended from the mid laner, and he's not any further than he was before. Zapman finds him. Hardcore sticks to him like glue.
Haddix in the middle of everybody.
Jake.
Big Cataclysm.
Jake
And it's on
finds
low.
2. Shinto goes down. Lasbra credited with the kill, and now it's a 4v3. Hardcore in the middle of everybody. Lasbra is still chunking away, and Haddix picks up 1. A knock up from Wrong You is good, but that may just be only to delay the inevitable. He's caught right out, and Lasbra picks up the double.
They cannot keep getting away with this, man. I am sick of it. How do the Bolts just get steamrolled in every early game, and it just doesn't matter because they just out-team fight? That is insane that they're able to continue to do this, but they did it again up against the healing comp. But exactly what we were worried about happened, where all this anti-heal comes into play. Jake gets a perfect blink Cataclysm. Leviathans group up too much, and that's what you want to do with the healing composition. You want to get next to each other with this hell, but the Bolts were ready, and Jake was ready in particular. A big Cataclysm. Can you notice the damage buff, by the way? I mean, he slammed Shinto and Panatom with that Cataclysm. It just made it easy for the Bolts to clean up, even with Ven, who got zero value out of that entire play. I mean, all he got was Yarkor's beads. That was it.
Did you see that spike in the experience in gold? 5,000 gold, swings immediately the opposite way, nearly 10,000 experience jumps up there in favor of the Bolts. But one thing to really keep note on there is check out the staggered times on those cursed songs, really utilizing that perfectly between those two players. It was, what, like a 10-second at most difference between them. You can see 11 seconds between those cooldowns, making sure not to stack them up and having good communication to make sure they're utilizing them effectively in that fight. It works out well for them. The Bolts, who were down, what, 7-1 going in the middle of that fight, 7-2, and now bringing it right back here as far as the kills are concerned. The gold much tighter than it was just a couple minutes ago.
And now the Leviathans have got to try and be a little bit more cognizant of how these fights are going to play out. Got to give Haddix a lot of credit in that fight as well. I think that that's a fight where a good soul laner makes a big difference for you, but it doesn't really show up on the stat sheet. But him getting in there and making everyone else focus on him. Yeah, Ven's going to die, but making sure that Panatom is hitting him, that Shinto is hitting him, that everyone is going to be focused on him. He gets his Ankh off, he gets his ultimate off, and then he gets out at the right moment, keeps the Leviathans focused on the front line, and then allows his other front liner to come in and save his life afterwards. That was really good frontline work by the Bolts in that last team fight.
Just like that, the Bolts are right back in it. The levels have closed up entirely. It's 20s across the board, aside from the supports, but that's about the life of the support. You're not really often going to hit that level 20 mark. Instead, it's now pushing up these towers. Only tier 2s left all across the board for both these teams, and the Bolts, they want to start this one, but the Leviathans giving up a bit of a soft defense here at this tier 2 tower, and they're not fully committed to giving it up just yet, but maybe if all 5 of the Bolts show up, that might be enough for them to back away. Maybe they're banking on their healing being a little bit too much for the Bolts to handle.
Shouldn't take long, though, for Barra with this build to hit this tier 2 tower down. The Leviathans don't have the best wave clear in the world. You're really relying on Uller to do it for you, and if he's close enough to use Bladed Arrow, that's a little closer than he wants to be because that's in blink range for some of these frontliners.
Rongu will be at the front of the tower looking for a pull, and looks like he may have just grabbed the decoy from Venenu instead of actually grabbing Venenu. A little bit of a misplay, and not really a misplay. You know, you never know when the Morgan is going to be in that decoy. You never know which one you're going to grab, and you never know when Haddix is going to blink in the backline, finds 4 with the ultimate, and immediately the tier 2 tower will be shredded down. That's all the Bolts wanted, and Haddix makes a perfect distraction.
He uses both his relics and his ultimate to do it, though. It's a pretty expensive investment in order to just get a tier 2 tower. Primal Fury's up, but the Leviathans know they're good.
Jake in the backline, Cataclysm finds 2, and immediately the Fear No Evil comes out from Panatom. Hardcore is bullying the backline. It's a transformation from Venenu into Haddix. He'll leap in the backline, get his own ultimate, and get some good damage. Barracuda takes down 1. Shinto on the run. Wrong use, slowed down. And the Bolts are able to turn the fight back in their favor. Venenu chasing forward with Jake, but they won't find Shinto. He'll make it back to the fountain, and now the Phoenix under siege by the Bolts.
Leviathan just caught totally off guard by Jake willing to go in that early into that team fight. And I was saying that Bera's got to make a big difference onto Yarkor in order for these team fights to change, and he basically soloed Yarkor in that fight. Everyone else is going to help Jake and Lasbra as he dives in, and Bera's just like, all right, I'll take care of this bear, don't worry about it, guys. Roots him as Yarkor's trying to dash away, and then it's an easy kill from that position. Bera, having not been a part of a lot of these team fights, is second highest on his team in player damage, and not that far behind are Lasbra and Ven, but it goes to show how much work Bera's been putting in just a few engagements.
I mean, he was 0-1-0 going into the fight right before the Fire Giant, now 1-1-4, so he's been a part of 5 of these last 6 kills that the Bolts have been able to put on the board. Actually, I think 5 of the last 5 that they've been able to put out in the middle of these engagements. Now with the Primal Fury going down, the left side Phoenix burn, that opens up the Fire Giant for the Olympus Bolts. It's the best Phoenix to take off the map if you want to go for that second Fire Giant. The Bolts are already walking forward, getting some of those wards placed down. Hax will drop his, and he'll make a quick back to base, maybe to pick up another sentry. That way they can always have that extra counter ward potential. You can see a full stack of wards across the board. Venenu just dropped his, but everybody else on the Bolts are fully stacked up on him.
So normally in this situation, I'd say the best way to counteract what the Bolts are doing is to get on top of this Morrigan first. We saw it in the mid-game. Very easy for these plays to go well if Yarkor could just find Venenu instantly. But that happened on the last Fire Giant fight, and it went horribly for the Leviathans. So I think the strategy has got to shift a little bit. You kind of have to sacrifice a backliner, and it's probably going to be Shinto because they're going to want to kill the Hell, which is probably better at this point anyways. I think I'd rather have my Ullr alive so that I can actually do Fire Giant with any sort of speed. And you've just got to get on top of Bera. I think you have to try and bypass this Blink initiation. Let Haddix and Jake do what they're going to do, and see if we can't make Bera uncomfortable on the back line.
Do the Leviathans take this 4v5 at the Fire Giant? It started up, and Bera will tank it with Calder and Jake in tow. Get a little bit of damage against it. Hax gets pulled in by Rongyu. He'll immediately use his leave. The Cripple Field comes out from Hardcore. Venenu and Bera are caught by Panatom. The ultimate was expended, but they'll both be able to make it out with their lives. Now it's Haddix diving the backline for Shinto, and ultimate out of Venenu gets the transformation into the Nike again. Panatom has to leap over to try and bail for his team, but Lasbra takes down Shinto and is able to just squeak by as Haddix picks up another. The barrier pushes that man against the wall, and a leap away from Haddix makes sure the Bolts can get out, but Hardcore is stuck in the middle of 3, and he'll take 1 maybe before trading out his life, or can he get Venenu's shield comes through. Lasbra teams up to get a double in the backline. Hardcore now has nowhere to go. Stuck. Cannot get that kill against Venenu just yet. And they'll fall down. A full deicide for Bera.
And that's going to be it. The Bolts take game 1 despite a massive deficit through the early stages of this game. It just takes a couple of team fights to go their way, and they were able to stagger out the Leviathans so well. There's not a lot of damage coming from the Leviathans in this game. I think you felt the lack of DPS on their side. You look at the player damage numbers, everyone a little bit low. Felt like the Leviathans just lost all their confidence after losing that one team fight by Fire Giant, that they just weren't able to get on the front foot the rest of the game. Every other engagement after that one was dictated by the Bolts, was started by the Bolts, and was ultimately finished by the Bolts.
I mean, the last 3 games now that we've seen by the Bolts is them getting rolled over in the early game. Teams just absolutely dominating the first 15, 20 minutes of the game, and the Bolts just don't care, man. They say, you know what? We're fine giving up this early, but if we can win these late game team fights like they have been, if they can get these big picks, that's enough for them. Bolts take game number 1. We're going to take it to a break, and we'll come back to the desk right after.
I gave up dabbing for Lynn.
Cool. No more dabbing for Final Call. He looked at me and said, I'm going to be on that stage next year. I'm going to become a world champion. Ripping through! Titan down, ball 3! A double kill myself!
Now, if you watch the opening death segment, this part's going to sound really familiar. Shop.smiteproleague.com. Go ahead and go get your merchandise. As you can see, we have not just all the jerseys and, of course, the beautiful merchandise for the SBL in general, but now we also have joggers for every single team. So you can lounge around, relax. I guess match Mifflin. Sometimes he wears the joggers when he's chilling. And, of course, rep your favorite team at the same time. And get yourself a mouse pad if you want. They're beautiful. We've got the Bologna one sitting over there, but all of the logos, all of the designs for each of the teams look phenomenal. And, of course, you then have a nice new mouse pad, which is always very helpful. I need one, so I think I know what I'm going to do.
And don't all purchases of team-branded gear go straight to the player score?
Yeah, and anything that isn't team branded comes.
So don't buy those
comes
by
to
the
me.
non-branded.
Yeah, buy the us stuff, baby. But you can also. Ooh, I like that. I don't think I've seen the Leviathans one up to this point. I actually really like that with the monster on the side there.
That's a
It looks,
Leviathan.
all of them look really good. It is a Leviathan. I guess that makes sense, doesn't it? Huh? And so you can go to shop.smiteproleague.com, pick those up. I'm Gore. That's Mifflin. And Mifflin, Bolts win game number 1. Now, if you stood up after the first 15 minutes, you were entirely certain that the Bolts weren't going to win game number 1, and you missed out on a whole lot of in-game content that happened there. I mean, they are down 10,000 gold, maybe 9,000 gold is where it
10,000.
really capped off, but ultimately 10,000 gold for a hefty duration. I mean, 14 minutes in, they're down 5k. Very soon after, they hit 20 minutes, down 10k, and then they just fight better.
Yeah, I think Aggro worded it best in that the Olympus Bolts should not be allowed to keep getting away with this style of play, right? They completely seized the early game, not only in play style, but also in draft. We brought it up on that initial P's and B's that the Leviathans drafted for pressure all the way across the map, and when you do so and you establish pressure as the Leviathans had, you can't be losing team fights up 10,000 gold. It was exactly this engagement that turns it all around for the Olympus Bolts, walking in into a Fire Giant 4 versus 5, actually. One of their players got picked initially. And then from there, the Olympus Bolts win that team fight. They get Fire Giant. They close up the majority of the gold lead, and they keep playing with that momentum until eventually the Titan falls down. But make no mistake, the Leviathans had this game in their hands. 10,000 gold at that early of a state in the game, about 21 minutes in, should be an insurmountable lead, I'd argue.
I think I heard Aggro at one point mentioning he was just like that. They slowed down a little bit on the Leviathans, and like it seemed like the steam left with that. There was a period where they had such a good lead and a potential to maybe steal away some big objectives, and things just didn't happen that way. So the Bolts all crowding around Lasber's PC right now, all very concentrated, but they are able to get it. And I mean, I even remember hearing you at one point, you went, oh, big surprise, the Bolts draft no early game pressure and they lose overwhelmingly in the early game. I think the big surprise really is the turnaround that they're able to have, because it's just the team fight. They did it yesterday as well, where they were straight up losing against the Kings and they had a really good team fight. It just feels ridiculous to have to figure out how to deal with that, because I don't know that there is a way to.
Hey, man, it's keep playing with the lead that you have and don't toss it, right? The Olympus Bolts are a counter-punch team, but that strategy has inherent risk. When you're playing for that reactive style, that means you're allowing your opposition to do what they want on the map, and you're just constantly waiting for this one mistake. Oh, did you mess up your blink engage on my Phoenix line? Maybe I beat you here. Oh, did you mess up one Fire Giant team fight? Well, you just lost the game off of it. And that's exactly what the Olympus Bolts look for every single time. But it's such a high risk.
Yeah.
If the Leviathans just play it a little bit slower around that Fire Giant engagement after they had gotten their pick back up, utilized their healing composition, the Olympus Bolts would not have been allowed to go for that counter-punch style. They would have just been knocked out. Unfortunately for the Leviathans, a little bit overzealous, a little bit out of position, and the Bolts are such a strong team that they will absolutely punish you for it.
Well, if you didn't believe us that the team fights were going in favor of the Bolts, look at the player damage, because that speaks wonders. A lot of healing that comes out, almost 12,000, or no, actually 12,000, that comes between Shinto and Rongyu, but that only negates one player on the Bolts. Everybody being able to get quite a few thousand damage over their opposition here in the Leviathan. So they do a great job of controlling that portion, and they're, even though ultimately losing so much farm, so much pressure early on, it still just seems like such a ridiculous 10,000 gold comebacks are not unheard of, but they are damn rare for a reason. And so now we're in an interesting spot. The Bolts, again, yesterday was nothing but shaky games. I would argue this is 3 quote-unquote shaky games in a row where they haven't really solidly won themselves the game. but they've played so well in the right moments that they've got themselves 3 complete victories.
Yeah, it's just these late-game counter-punch single knockout hits, right? And that's exactly what the Bolts have been looking for every single time. They have not controlled an early-game phase. Instead, they always wait for their opposition to make a mistake and then optimize on it incredibly well. So we'll see how the Leviathans try to shift things up here in Game 2. Whether or not they go towards the same draft could be up in the air. But Gore, I think if the Leviathans literally force the exact same draft and play the exact same way, I couldn't argue against them. Sure, they lost the game, but 10,000 gold in the lead, 20 minutes in, 5,000 at 10 minutes. Are you kidding me, bro? That's so much that you just got to think to yourself, all right, we threw it away. That's got to be the only call. All right, let's just let's clean it up a little bit in the end game, and we're going to be just fine if we're able to play the exact same early game. If anyone should be making large sweeping changes, I'd argue it should likely be the Bolts.
Well, we'll see what happens in picks and bans if they're going to make any large swinging changes, and if they're going to let the Leviathans just run it straight back. Leviathans will be first pick this time as opposed to second pick, and so that is going to change just a little bit of their draft. And I mean, you had said it. I'm kind of looking at it, except for like Geb, who maybe is going to get first pick over some of the gods they had. They kind of ran exactly what they wanted to, so I am interested and anxious as to what the Leviathans are going to lock in here.
Yeah, we are. And I think maybe the Leviathans could even try and double down right on that early game aggressive style, maybe even put Rongu on something like the Ymir or the Horus to even further push their lead in the early. Not that Sylvanas is exactly a poor pressure god, still has some of the best clear out of the Guardian role, maybe barring Yomoja, the second best, I'd say, as far as minions are concerned inside of the early game. But as of now, the Leviathans are keeping their heads towards some of the things the Bolts have been looking for. The Morrigan taken off the table, Geb removed as well, so the Bolts going to have to dedicate themselves to those more standard bans that we used to be seeing. Tiamat and Yomoja taken away.
Yeah, so far 2/5 of the team that the Bolts had taken away, as you had mentioned, the Geb and the Morrigan. This opens up, what was it? Last time we had Terra, Khepri, Odin, and Serket were the bans that would have been, that were not the Tiamat and the Yomoja. So you only got 2 slots to fill 4 gods to make things go roughly similar. And it makes things a little more interesting. A lot of support focus away from the Bolts during the beginning of the last set. Still able to pick up the Geb first. Now that's going to be a change. Khepri, maybe something they actually want to let through. And Serket is the one that I'm keeping my eye on, but it's the Odin, actually, from the Leviathans, Mifflin. I kind of surprised, honestly, to see it, although, admittedly, with what he's been able to accomplish and Haddix, just in general, it feels like a good ban.
Odin is just so frustrating to play against. Legitimately just shifts up your entire game plan in every single match. Odin makes you think about going towards that Phantom in the early game. Makes you think, okay, well, sure, I can leap out of the cage, but I'm taking damage on the tail end of it. It's pretty easy to chase you out there. It shifts up how you approach the team fight engagements. I mean, the communications on a pro team when you're playing with or against an Odin, here's what with Odin is like. Hey, is Ring of Spears up? No? All right, well, wait. How long on that cooldown? All right, we'll fight then. If you're playing against an Odin, oh, he used Ring of Spears? Let's go now. We got like 30 seconds. Let's get in there. So it really does change how you can approach these games. And now Hell going to round out the banning phase here from the Olympus Bolts. So the Leviathans are in a position where they could go towards that RDO in the first slot. I was going to bring up the Serket as well, but I don't know why I would have brought up the Serket when RDO's out there. And that god, although not winning the most on the playing field right now, is still incredibly dominant. Just so hard to deal with.
Did a lot in that last game, was just shy of being able to potentially turn around. Well, ended up being a full-on deicide and the game-ending wipe for the Leviathans. The other thing I was going to ask you, and this maybe is just something as the grand scheme, when you picked up, what was it, RDO, Hell, Sylvanas last time around, Odin seems to be a big thorn in the side for those 3 with the anti-heal he can bring. It kind of makes sense if they're maybe leaning towards some similar picks. Raijin, someone we didn't get to see last game, but with Morrigan gone, Hell gone, you've got to figure something else out in the mid lane, and it will be the Khepri. That was the 3rd ban from the Bolts last game. They're going to go ahead and scoop that up. Feels like, again, a solid foundation for what should be a good team.
Already the Bolts have themselves a little bit more early game pressure than they did in game 1. Raijin's going to have a pretty decent matchup into whoever the Leviathans take inside of their mid slot. So pressure through the center of the map should favor the Olympus Bolts, at least insofar as the mages right now. And Raijin still does have incredibly strong scaling come into the late game. So if the Bolts do decide to play that more reactive counterpunch style where you're farming out throughout the early, you're not sacrificing too much because Taiko Drums is going to slam you in the late no matter what. Raiju is still one of the best teamfight tools from these mages outside of Ultimate. So I like a lot what the Bolts have here. This is surprising though. Hachiman selected this highly inside of your draft with Uhl still available, even the Artemis, I'd argue, is still pretty strong as well. But Hachiman, very safe, CC immunity, as well as just kind of synergizes pretty well with this new style of build. Can work out, and it's something Zapman has liked a lot in the past.
It feels a lot like, and maybe this is just the declaration they wanted to make with that. Hey, you know what? You know Shinto and Panatom? Yeah, we're gonna wait a little bit before we lock in anything for them. We want to see what they're going into, especially because it might give them a glimpse into whether or not this is Nike solo again, or if it's going to be Nike in the jungle, which we have seen Lasper play recently because he just did it yesterday. So it makes things interesting. Nike is that lock-in for the Bolts to finish out their top 3. Terra is another interesting conversation, though. Banned heftily in, a few weeks ago. First game this set, Bolts ban it away, but hasn't really been picked up in the sets that she's been let through. She's kind of just been sitting on the sidelines, like everyone's amped her up, she's ready to go, but no one's actually letting her out onto the field.
Yeah, Terra still is incredibly strong, though. The CC core that she brings, able to lock down entire jungle pass as well as lanes with a root. Earthen Fury, don't need to really talk about how strong that ability is, but I will anyway. Gives your team a burst of healing and gives the enemies a burst of damage towards them.
Yeah,
so
that's
Terra
pretty good.
Helps out a lot inside of that team fight phase, which is where the Leviathans floundered inside of Game 1. But again, it is healing that you can't really be choosy about. If you're popping Earthen Fury, everybody within range is going to be applied by that heal as far as your allies are concerned. And when you've got things like Ankh on the other side, which might be getting looked at just because of this RDO, now all of a sudden whoever is getting healed is taking percentage more damage. Feels pretty bad for the Leviathans. So the Bolts might have their eyes towards that Ankh yet again.
Well, they ban out Morgan the Face, Susano for the Bolts. The other side bans out Daji and the Set, which caused a lot of trouble. A couple of double kills there for Lasbra towards the very tail end of the game. What do they need sitting here on the Bolts? We're still maybe potentially looking for a jungle, but a Hunter was the one that I was eyeing for. Somebody that doesn't necessarily need the counter matchup pick and also already knows their matchup, so you could just lock in whatever you're feeling. Ho Yi, who gets locked in here. 14% win rate across 7 games. Has not been the most successful Hunter in the last couple of weeks, despite the fact that he has risen, at least in terms of picks.
Yeah, Emilito actually played this pick yesterday, I believe, and he looked pretty good on it. He was putting the pressure on a Cyclone Spin. Worth noting, though, Cyclone Spin was playing that set, so wasn't able to return damage from a range. But still, this god has a lot of kill potential. The stun is incredibly nice. The team fight ultimate as well can shift up these engagements, shift up where you're allowed to walk inside of the jungle, and up against these tanky gods like Ardio, like Gilgamesh, the Mark of the Golden Crow does feel incredibly strong, dealing additional damage as their HP bars go down. So Ho Yi makes some sense here, but I'm not sure how well he's going to synergize with this newfangled like Transcendence, Jotun's Crusher, Brawler style of build. We might see him go a little bit more so towards the standard Kin size, Wind Demon, things along those lines.
Just typical power, whatever can let him box overall on that lane. But Hachiman, you had mentioned, synergizes pretty well with some of the more recent builds. And so that's going to be an interesting lane to keep your eyes on. Merlin, Gilgamesh that get locked in here. And this is a draft now, if I look at the Leviathans, maybe not quite running the exact same as the, whatever the top tier list is going to be. This feels a lot more just Leviathans up front with it. And, well, we were wondering whether or not it was going to be a Haddix or a Lasbra pick. It's a Loki to finalize out the Bolts draft. I guess you can take your pick of the litter. Do you want to talk about the Leviathans first? Or you want to talk about this Loki?
Loki's brings in a lot of early game pressure, man. I love seeing Loki get picked out, and up against gods like Hachiman or even this Merlin, you've got some pretty easy targets to try and lock down throughout the early. Worth noting that the flurry does apply a slight slow, so Merlin, after using that flicker, is going to have a very hard time escaping this Loki. But every time the Leviathans lock in Merlin, in particular for Shinto, it almost feels like early seasons of Pokemon, like Ash Ketchum turning his hat around, getting a little bit serious. That's that Merlin Shinto pick for the Leviathans, man. They are coming to fight here.
I was going to ask you, because everyone except Jake in the Bolts room has the hat facing forward. I was going to ask if
Jake's
they lost this game, if they turn it around. Like, if we see that happen, they all go in the same route. But we don't even know, because we have to figure out in Game 2 whether or not they're even going to get there. The Gilgamesh jungle that's going to be coming through for the Leviathans. We've been bouncing back and forth for this, and specifically it's just these warriors. We're still seeing some shades of them that we saw in, kind of like the Phase 2 meta. Is he still going to be as prominent as we're used to seeing, or is this a pick that is going to kind of flounder here?
I think Gilgamesh has the potential to just go for that raw damage build. You can still go towards that slightly bruiser style. Blackthorn Hammer is still an incredible stat stick that will help out the Sun Scimitar, the first ability dealing additional damage based on how much HP you actually have. So Gilgamesh has some options, but if you want to go towards like Jotun's Crusher, Brawler Speed Stick on Gilgamesh, you're not feeling so bad about it. His damage output is still incredibly good, so keep your eye on him. I think he does fit into this kind of new play style of the jungle pretty well, but it is slightly lacking in the ability to 1v1, especially considering like what we've seen from like Captain Twig and Lasbra yesterday, where they're taking 1v1 after 1v1 inside of these lanes. Gilgamesh doesn't win many of those.
Now, that'll be interesting to see. Lasbra was, admittedly, he was playing dodgy, so it makes sense, but he was hunting in the jungle. Like, there were times where he had no other goal than to find a player to kill, and unfortunately for Twig,
it's like him 8 times.
It was him every single time. Loki, maybe not as adept at doing that as Daji, but still someone that you have to be a little bit worried about. The Khepri is the one that really gives me a start up here. Just when you look at the team fight, I feel like he's the one that pushes the Bolts up to the next level. We'll figure out if it will allow them to get a 2-0, if the Leviathans can even things out here in game number 2.
Man, if it's any indication like we've seen in the last 3 games out of the Bolts, we can just, hey, let's just not even care about the first 15 minutes of the game. Let's just jump right to that mid-stage of the game. A little bit of a joking here. It's J-Mac and Aggro with Doug on the camera, and the Bolts are able to bring a nice little win out at the latter half of game number 1. Leviathans draft towards a little bit more of that late game here, going back to their classic Merlin for Shinto, even Panatom picking up a Warrior. A little bit of a shades of old with the previous patch kind of looking at this comp.
Exactly. It's a lot more team fight centric. I mean, they had good team fighting tools last game. That's the thing is, you know, the Leviathans didn't draft all early game and then just get blown out whenever it got to a late game fight. They kind of drafted for late game and then still got blown out when it came to a late game fight. That's the concerning part. So I think they've got a better team fight than they did last time. It's a lot easier to execute Shinto just doing Merlin damage throughout. But overall, still a bit of a concern because the Bolts have just been so good when it comes to those late game moments.
Haddock's actually teaming up with Lasper to start clearing out some of these jungle camps. Meanwhile, Hardcore has been able to just walk up and do the buff on his own. Barracuda in a little bit of danger. He'll be forced to be pushed back towards that tower, but he's got some potions, so he'll be able to sustain up just fine. Going with this Ho Yi, who has not seen a whole lot of success. 7 games played, only one of those games has been a win so far on this god, so going to be all eyes on this Ho Yi to see if maybe Barracuda can up that win rate a little bit.
And interesting that both hunters went Bumba's Dagger last game and now have gone back to the Hunter's Cowl. So maybe it's about the types of hunters they are. I mean, Uller and Scotty much more ability-based hunters, Ho Yi and Hachiman much more auto-attack-based hunters, so maybe that's the differential between these two. But switch up there for their starter items. Bolt support and Leviathan supports both stick with that benevolence, interestingly enough.
And it will be a Tier 1 male on the side of Jake, so looking towards a sovereignty early on like we saw last game, and it's a Tier 1 crown for Rongyu. So again, the Lotus Crown still sticking with these healer supports is Rongyu and even Hardcore. Back again on this RDO. Notably, they have changed out. No healer for the mid laner this time, so there'll be a little bit less on the heals, but I don't doubt that the Bolts here will probably still try and draft towards a little bit more anti-heal in their composition, even up against just these two gods.
Yeah, I think that overall you should still be building a good amount of anti-heal. I mean, maybe not double Cursed Onk, but still feel like Jake should probably get Onk or Haddock should probably get Onk. One of them should pick that up. You should still see Divine Ruin. You should still see Brawler's Beat Stick. All of those things should stay the same. Terra and Artio, just two Guardians that you cannot afford to let go unchecked in the healing department. So should be pretty much more the same from the Bolts build-wise. I'm interested to see what direction Panatom is going to go with his build, though. I mean, no mannequins for him. That's what we traditionally saw for Gilgamesh. Switches it up, goes the Bumbas. I'm not super convinced that Gilgamesh is still a top-tier jungler. I was kind of surprised to see Panatom go for it in this game. But if their identity was going to be mid to late game team fighting, covering a lot of distance in the AoE, Gilgamesh does that pretty well.
Yeah, typically it's been kind of really just the Erlong Shen of the Warriors who's kind of lived on past this assassin meta, but we have seen some shades of Gilgamesh. I believe Scream played it for the Scarabs in one of the first games of the new patch, so he's still seeing a little bit of priority with it, though not nearly as much as we had seen before with that 3.8 balance. And with these mid laners, they are going back towards this Conduit Gem, which we've been seeing a little bit more of out of the mid laners. Just get some of that extra early damage, get a little bit of that extra early clear. Curious to see if we will see a Divine Ruin come out of Venenu just to maybe try and also answer against some of this healings. Overall, it just seems like it is a good stat stick to have no matter what.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if Venenu doesn't go for that Divine Ruin. So that's the direction I'm expecting. I mean, Lasbra is going to have a lot of weight on his shoulders because it could be difficult with how much support all the Leviathans backliners have in order to get some of these kills.
A hardcore hill dash, and Elasper will go in with some swipes, but not a whole lot of follow-up here. Just putting some poke against hardcore, not willing to commit the ultimate out of the Loki to try and take him down. It's just Haddix who burns the Sentinel of Zeus. Hardcore makes it out, doesn't have to use any relics either.
Yeah, it might be a good opportunity now for Panatom to show up, because no beads for Haddix. He's got Blink instead, and without that Sentinel of Zeus, maybe a little CC chain is possible. If they can bait that jump, use the Winds of Shamash on the follow-up, could be good.
Exact same time that we saw it last round, that this time Barracuda's got to leave. He'll make it back to the tower, and so will Jake, but the tower is not a safe haven for him. Wrong, you and Panatom dive under with Zapman, and they pick up another 2 kills in the dual lane, exact same way they did in game 1.
Literally the exact same timing. Dual laners are 5 for the Leviathans. They aren't 5 for the Bolts. And Panatom walks on over. And now, if you're Ro, you're the coach of the Bolts. It's like, okay, why are we not hitting 5? Why are they hitting 5? How can we ward better? Make sure we have a ward for this moment, because that is back-to-back times. It's like a set play Leviathans have run to give them a guaranteed advantage. And it's not as big of an advantage as it was last game. That last game, they were up closer to 2,000 gold at this point, but it's still 1,400 at 5 minutes. And again, Shinto has a bit of an experience lead. It's going to be a big experience lead in the dual lane. Very, very similar to Shades of Game 1.
Well, hardcore, he'll still be behind just a tad bit in solo lane. Not too much, though. Haddix will make sure to keep just a tad little bit up. The Greater Scorpion started up by the Bolts. They'll try and take this one. Last time hardcore was able to thwart them at this objective. Haddix will eat a drop kick from Panatom, but it will be a Scorpion going towards the Bolts on this right side, game number 2. Left side is where they were able to pick it up, but that Scorpion has been untouched as of late. Zapman and Barracuda will have their 1v1s now over in the duo lane, and maybe now we'll get to see, again, if Barracuda can maintain. Last time he fell a little bit behind early after being first blooded, and then he just got to sit there and was able to maintain that similar level of experience. We'll see if he can do the same here in game 2.
I mean, it was Hachiman. It's Hachiman this game instead of the Ullr. Both of those gods push leads pretty well. They both force you to fight them and all in you pretty well, but Barra was able to navigate it in the last game, and that tells me that he's probably pretty likely to be able to do it in this one. But a big difference in builds. It's Crusher there for Zapman as opposed to the Ichaival for Barracuda. So if Barra can start landing autos before the trade starts, then he's going to be pretty well favored. But if Zap can just use his Heavenly Banner as poke from a distance, then try and all in with the mounted archery once Barra hits, that 60% health threshold or so, then it should be pretty easy for him to execute a solo kill.
Wrong you doing what Wrong you does best, which is sitting and waiting for somebody to walk up. But Barra will spot him out with a nice little cheeky ward over the wall. Catches out the support, so there will be no antics to be had from Wrong you this time. Normally he is in that mid lane as the Circuit, kind of sitting stealth under the middle of the lane, but this time he's sitting in the jungle. Jake will rotate over now and give Barra just a little bit of relief, and he might need some for how much Wrong you has been sticking around this left side of the map. Just make sure that his Hunter can be A-okay and make sure he can get that farm. Venenu, Rada Tahuti is a first item. We've been seeing a lot of back and forth on this first item selection. Honestly, I don't know what's in the minds of them, whether the cooldown is the most important or they just want all this raw damage value.
A lot of times it's, I backed and do I have enough gold for Rod? If yes, I buy. If I don't, then I'm buying Chronos Pendant. But it also it requires you to think about your build holistically. Am I getting Soul Gem most of the time? Yes. Am I getting Spear of Desolation or Chronos Pendant later on? That I go Sands of Time? All of those are pretty relevant questions. But for me personally, I'm a big fan of the Rod first item for a god like Raijin, because you get so much value out of that passive. Some mages, I don't really need Rod of Tahuti on Scylla. If someone's 50%, I'm killing them. It doesn't really matter whether or not I have Rod passive. But because Raijin is so tick-oriented and his damage, even though it's fairly fast, it is spread out in individual instances. So if my first hit of Percussive Storm puts you below Rod passive threshold, then my next two are going to do a lot more damage. And the same can be said for Taiko Drums, for Raiju ticks. All of those things can add up pretty quickly. So I'm a big fan of Rod of Tahuti on a god like Raijin. He's going to need to go Divine, and this does slow his build down a little bit because it is so expensive. But so is Chronos Pendant. I mean, Chronos Pendant isn't that much cheaper. I'm definitely a fan of seeing a bit more Rod as first item again.
Yeah, I think it's only, maybe like 300 gold cheaper
Yeah,
for a
so.
Chronos Pendant, somewhere around there. 3,000 gold it takes to get that Rod of Tahuti, so an expensive first item, but like I said, hey, if you got the gold for a Rod of Tahuti, you might as well just go back for it. I think that was that the old Lassus mentality he used to have? It's like, well, I was going to go back and get my Chronos Pendant, but I just happen to have enough for Ratatouille. Haddix might be staring down the barrel of 3 Leviathans. He'll get hit by the Earthen Fury, dropkick immune by the ultimate. When just Shamash come through, he'll leap away. Panatom will chase him down, and our core will make sure to lock him down. Leviathans get another pick under the tier 1 tower. Lasbra too late on the rotation to help out his solo.
It's a really good job tanking up that tower, making sure that Rongi was the one tanking it, that he doesn't need to go super deep. He can just stand there and watch his fellas do his dirty work for him. So good dive on that right-hand side. Haddix just unable to withstand it whatsoever. All that base damage coming from RDO and from Terra is going to be difficult to stand up to. Even though he had a nice Sentinel Zeus to immune the dropkick CC. It was well played, but not a whole lot of options when there's that many people in your lane this early.
Spreading the love of kills all across the map. 1 kill for each of the dual laners, and now 1 on the solo against the Bolts. The Leviathans are trying to apply pressure just about anywhere they can. It's worked out so far for them. 4 players have a 1-level lead over the opposition, even Hardcore going as close to a level and a half, maybe even closer towards that 2 level. It's only Barra who's been able to somewhat maintain pace here with Zatman despite falling for first blood. 3,000 gold in favor for the Leviathans early on. Jake will take a little bit of damage, but he'll make it out A-okay. Shinto already has that Spear of the Magus online.
Love it. Love this on Merlin. It's so often tick-based. I mean, you've got tick damage for literally every single stance for Merlin. You can really put this item to full effect. And, you know, Flat Pen's still good, even though we don't see it that often anymore. I'm a big fan of the early Magus. When you don't need that Divine and you don't need the cooldown, you know, you're expecting to be able to get 40% cooldown from a soul gem that he'll get later on, plus a power potion. So he doesn't need to prioritize getting something like Spear of Desolation. He can worry more about his one-shot.
Ooh, and you can see the damage that's already going up against Jake. That stun even doing a little bit more because of that marked passive that it provides to him. Now, advantage is in favor of Leviathans. They still have now a little over 3,000 gold in their favor, experience across the board, widely in their favor. It's a little bit of a disparity, mostly towards that support role, about 2 levels down, and Leviathans, with their small lead, give them an inch. They're going to take a mile, and that mile is going to be the Pyromancer. More gold in their pockets, and a little bit of extra movement speed now coming out of the base.
Just getting those little marginal advantages where they can, but J-Mac, I'm going to be honest, it's kind of hard to get excited about a good lead for the Leviathans in 11 minutes because
the Bolts don't care about it.
The Bolts don't seem to care. They continue to just wait and not do a whole lot and let the Leviathans take what they please from the map. If I'm the Leviathans, I'm showing up to buff invades. I'm pulling Gold Fury. I mean, I might as well, because are the Bolts going to do anything about it? They haven't shown me that they will at all during the set, and they didn't do it really against the Kings either. And this is a pretty different mentality for this team. I mean, you think about the way that they've played over the last 2 years up until this point. They've been known as a very aggressive early game team, consistently on your purples and trying to really pressure you out and win through the early stages of the game. But definitely a bit of a different look for them these last few weeks, particularly this week where they did it against the Kings and did it against the Leviathans again in game 1.
It's been a little bit of a dynamic shift between these two teams. You know, you're talking about the Bolts used to be very early game. The Leviathans used to be that late game team. They were the ones who, no matter what lead you build, we're going to fight back against you every single time. Lasbra in danger, a blinking from Panatom, but he can't find him out of the stealth. Instead, Lasbra will turn it back on him. Winja Shamash and the Assassinate going to be jumped right over. Panatom will trade out his life 1 for 1. Haddix credited to the kill. And Haddix will be able to walk away with Jake, but it's a 1-1 trade here.
Should have been 1 for 0 though, J-Mac. I mean, that Scarab's Blessing just goes on the wrong target from Jake. Ulted himself. Lasbra was a little bit too close.
The Nanu in danger now. Zatman rotates over to mid and puts the mid laner in the dirt, and Iaijutsu gets the Taiko drums out of him. And immediately put him down, gets a mid camp for his trouble, and Zatman just going to try and exploit this lead that he's picked up for himself. 2-0-1 on the Hunter, 0-1-0 for Barracuda on the opposite side. Venenu just not having fun with Zatman rotating over.
No, quick pause coming out in this moment, but should be able to get back in just a second. If you were wondering why Crusher is good on the Hachiman, it's that. It's just a pure all-in onto Venenu, who uses maybe the wrong relic in that instance, but it's really hard to tell what's going to be coming at you whenever you kind of just get clotheslined from Zatman coming from the left-hand side. I don't know if Barra didn't call it or Ven didn't respect it, but something didn't happen in that moment, and Zap was able to make a nice little play.
As that man now with his second kill on the board, Leviathans can continue to push up this lead. 4,000 gold to their name after that Pyromancer goes down and an extra couple of kills. Now starting up the Gold Fury, and with the Merlin, a really good god to kind of burn this one down. Ice Dance helps take it down to half, and then Shinto will use the fire to try and zone Jake away, but Gold Fury hasn't been taken away just yet. Jake gets caught in the middle, the root holds Rongu in place, and Panatom's rotation over means the Leviathans can secure the Gold Fury, who used the drop kick just for a little bit of extra mobility, but a quick escape from the Leviathans mean a nice and clean objective.
And this is exactly what I was asking for earlier. If the bolts aren't going to be here in force, let's just do it. You know, if Lasbra is going to be more focused on stealing away farm, which is a fine option from that position. I mean, they just lost their mid laner. He doesn't have beads or ultimate. That's a good, strong pull, even if the bolts were contesting heavily early. I think that I would still like that decision from the Leviathans, but when the bolts don't seem to be particularly interested in defending early, then yeah, I'm going to show up and I'm going to try and do it right in their face. Why not?
Lasbra does get a speed buff steal because of it, so that one goes his way. They take a back camp, and they'll grab their Scorpion on that top side, so a little bit of enhanced buff for the speed and the blue. But the bolts, again, they're just kind of playing the same way they really did in game number 1, which was we're not really interested in these fights. We're not really concerned with taking them. Leviathans doing what they can to try and take advantage of this, but if there's any indication that we saw from game 1, 5,000 at 15 may not be enough. It's up to the bolts to see if they decide to turn up for these late game fights.
And remember how big the experience leads were in the last game too. I mean, it was a 6-level deficit in the mid 3v3 total. It was 2 in each of the 3 roles. This game, experience still heavily in the Leviathan's favor, but it's very spread out. It isn't nearly as lopsided as it was. You've got a slight lead for Zap, a slight lead for Shinto, a slight lead for Yarkor and Rongu, but not full levels, I don't think, in any of those roles. Kind of middling in all those positions. If the bolts are just trying to win one team fight later on, they've got much better odds to do it in this game than they did in the last one.
It's a level and a half between the mid laners, kind of teetering back and forth between that too. Shinto, a full item up over Venenu. Jake will walk over a Warden. He'll eat some of the damage from this Merlin. Hardcore even rotates over to try and put him down. A root is good. And the damage from the mid laner is nice, but Jake doesn't have, or Jake has a little too much defense online to really be deterred too much by this mid laner. So Shinto just gets the poke, and they get a little bit of tier 1 tower pressure. Venenu now surrounded as Panatom blinks under the tower, goes for the drop kick, but whips it, and that'll be a quick out for Venenu. Now turning it back, Haddix is turning the tables on Panatom. He'll fall down, and an incoming ultimate from Lasbra stuns out Shinto, gets the beads, and the chase after is good. Lasbra takes down one, and our core and Rongu, the frontliners left to try and chase out this Loki.
Oh, good ultimate this time from Jake, but Zap might be in position to punish on the revive. Ven's dash gets canceled, but should be able to get it off.
Gets out under the tower. Now it's Jake here in the middle of 2. He'll be able to get away in a clean fight from the bolts. Nets them 2 kills. They don't lose out on anybody, but they lose out on quite a few relics. You see 6 of them burn during that engagement just to make sure that they can keep their mid laner, keep that jungler alive.
Look, I mean, I think the Leviathans might be feeling that same frustration that we have been talking about during this cast, and that you know, these big leads don't seem to matter, and the bolts aren't fighting us. It's the frustrating moment of, you hit us back, do something, because otherwise you start to feel a little bit unnerved that they're just going to take whatever you throw at them and then be able to turn it back later on. So maybe losing a little bit of patience with that dive in the mid lane. Didn't have perfect information as to where everyone else was on that map. Haddix had a good rotation over that was a little earlier than I think the Leviathans were expecting.
Pyromancer started by the bolts, and Pyromancer finished by the bolts. No response in time from the Leviathans. Panatom was the closest one. Instead, he'll go ahead and just D-ward out, take a sentry away from the bolts, and try and get some more vision control around that fire giant. But now the bolts here, 17 minutes in, starting to be a little bit more proactive. They win a fight, they take a Pyromancer, and they might be looking for even more. Shinto rotates over and finds Jake, but he's surrounded by 3. Lasbra goes in with the assassinate, grabs Shinto, and it's Venenu ready for him on the flicker. Shinto falls down from the dot damage. It's more than enough. It's a 1-1 trade. Lasbra kicked against the wall, but Barracuda's rotated over. The stun makes sure to help Lasbra get out. It's a pullback. Rongu grabbed, and Barracuda Lasbra will put him down. It's a double kill for the jungler, but Jake with no ultimate available, and Zapman rotating over. Could be a kill for the Leviathans. They pick up 1. Can they pick up even more? 2 down. Haddix caught in the middle of 2. The cripple field holds him in place, but Haddix makes it back to the tier 1.
Man, Zap came into that fight red hot, but Barrett's stun right at the very end may have just saved Haddix's life. A really good fight back and forth between these two sides. I love the aggression there from the Bolts. They know Shinto doesn't have relics. They go in for him right away, but Shinto, after flickering maybe the wrong direction, didn't realize where Venenu was, didn't flicker down towards his jungle, heads towards his tier 1 tower in mid, finds himself, he knows he's dead because he's barrel stuffing a Raijin, but gets all of his damage off before he dies and made it a really easy cleanup kill on the back end for Panatom.
Barrett tries to go for the triple bounce there, but doesn't end up finding anything. It'll just be a purple buff stolen away by the Leviathans. Still about 4,000, 4,500 gold in the Leviathans' favor, but that's been kind of the name of the game for the last 6 or so minutes of play, is they really haven't gone anywhere beyond 4,500, 5,000 gold. The Bolts have been kind of just maintaining a stalemate at that point. And it seems the Bolts are just absolutely fine with it. Fury is back up. Leviathans had the vision control via the Oracles there. There's a sentry ward by the Bolts sitting by just in case the Leviathans try and pull it behind their backs.
This is an interesting idea here from the Bolts. Are they going to actually be willing to take this fight around the Primal Fury? I think that they're in a position now where, even though they're down still about 5,000, they've won these last few skirmishes pretty well, and their relics are coming back up. The problem is the relics for Bara, and he's on a God in Ho Yi that is pretty vulnerable to having no relics. No CC immunity in the kit, a pretty predictable leap, though it does buy him good time in the air and out of combat. So we'll see how willing the Bolts are to step up and defend, assuming the Leviathans are going to be the first one on this objective and pulling it.
Panatom goes back to base and picks up a Magi's Cloak to try and deal with some of the CC coming from the Bolts, namely being Lazra's ultimate, even that Thunder Crash from Venenu, or could just be trying to get away from Jake more than anything. Jake has been getting some very nice pulls against these frontliners. Even Panatom has been struggling to deal with this Khepri. The revives, while they may not have been the biggest impact so far for Awesome Jake, he has been able to get some decent ones, and now it'll be a dive in for Hardcore. Haddix is the target. Dropkick way off the mark from Panatom. Haddix, even with the wall, may just be able to walk back under that tier 1. Thanks to the help of that Mantle of Discord, stuns them out. He'll make it back, but he's very worse for wear.
I think Panatom was trying to dropkick a minion into Haddix in that instance, and the minion moved out of the way at the last moment, but still getting that Mantle cooldown, it's a long one. That'll open up a Primal Fury really easily for the Leviathans, and it just continues to be more of the same for the Bolts. No stress about these mini objectives, though I wouldn't call these Furies mini necessarily. It's really more about focusing on this Fire Giant and getting to the point where we can make sure that that is going to be under contestation. So Zap has this game gone for a little bit of crit. He's gone Wind Demon. I'm curious to see where he's going to go with his 6th item. Wouldn't be surprised to see it be a Deathbringer, because there isn't any Spectral Armors quite yet. Haddix may build it next, as well as Jake after a Pridwin, but that's still a lot of gold until that's complete. But Zap's got some time to wait, because he can just upgrade his starter from this position and then wait to see what the Bolts start building for their next item and make his decision based off that.
Leather Cow still needs to be upgraded for both of the Hunters, though Zap is the only one at 20 who can do so just now. They'll take away the purple buff and go for their Scorpion to get some extra enhanced buffs on the board for their team. Leviathan's up nearly 8,000 gold over the Bolts, and it's the same position that we've seen them in from game 1. I feel like it's a broken record, but it's really all we've been seeing out of the Bolts in the last 3 games they've played, between the entire set of the Kings and game number 1 here up against the Leviathans, but there hasn't been as much fight back from the Bolts that we saw from that previous game. They've been a little bit more passive. Maybe we'll finally start to see them be a little bit proactive around this Fire Giant.
They're down about 8,000, but the Leviathans are going to do this much faster than they did last game because of Zapman's crit.
Fire Giant is almost down. A quarter health and a dropkick shoves Haddix in the back line. He's
they
in the
picked
middle
it
of 4, picks it away. Leviathans do get the Fire Giant, and now Haddix is stuck in the middle of 4, and he will fall down. Shinto credit for the kill. Hardcore gets the root against Venenu, and that's dangerous for the mid laner. Lasbra, he'll sneak around the back with a blink in by Hardcore. Venenu in danger. The revive is being waited out while Zapman grabs Jake, and Panatom picks up the mid. It's only Lasbra left to try and slow them down, as Barracuda has nothing to do with this fight.
I don't know if they can end, though, J-Mac. There's still a lot of towers up for the Bolt side of the map. That's going to make that Titan pretty tanky. But Barra doesn't have ult. They don't have a big wave coming. I don't know. I think this could be close.
Lasbra is here. Barracuda just went back to base, and it's a 5-strong Leviathans up against this Titan. Can they do it? Is the defense from the Bolt's gonna be enough. Hardcore is falling low. Barracuda and Lasper getting some good damage. Dropkick shoves the jungler away, but the Titan is just taking a little bit too much. Barracuda picks up one, Lasper picks up a second, but the Titan is the ultimate name of the game. Leviathans, just shy of 23 minutes. They take game number 2.
Look, and that's the way game 1 probably should have gone for the Leviathans. They get this big lead, they go over to Fire, they secure it. It's that simple. But it really wasn't even in this game because that Fire Giant fight got really sketchy. I thought the Leviathans stayed on it too long if they're gonna drop off and fight, if that was the call going in. And then you know what secured it was the final tick of Winds of Shamash, that big burst damage that comes out with Taiko drums coming through with a lot of damage because the bolts were really the ones primarily on the fire at that point. I think the Leviathans, despite a big lead and how much they'd earned it and how well they'd played in that game, still maybe got a bit lucky that the coin fell on their side.
Well, as history always shows, we will be going to a game number 3 between these two teams. We're going to take it to a break and get you guys set up for it in just a moment.
I win? What did it win?
You win the respect.
You're telling me an alien wore this?
Perfect. Okay, that was a good cut.
Messaging him to mute.
The best graphics you
really need Ultra, of course, and I can probably watch a stream on the side.
Content's gonna look good. Pretty good, pretty good.
YouTube.com/SmitePro is where you can go. If you ever miss out on any of the media day, all of that content gets thrown up there. I think most recently we have a bunch of videos, including the dragons, that are being featured on the channel. But of course, there's not just that. There's roster apocalypse videos, a whole ton of content for you just waiting at YouTube.com/SmitePro. So make sure you go there and check out everything that you can and subscribe while you're at it so you can get all the new content. We're going to be doing a media day with the Scarabs a little bit later this week, and if you just happen to or have to miss any of the content, you'll be able to watch that when it gets uploaded right afterward. It's been filling my inbox every time. I guess subscription box, what is that? The main page, whatever. You know what it is. It's YouTube. It's Gore, it's Mifflin. And hey, Leviathans start similarly, but this time win the game.
Yeah, it was a little bit more contentious in the early game this time around. The Olympus Bolts obviously drafted slightly more for early game pressure, so they were able to keep that fight even, but around that 8, 9, 10-minute mark, the Leviathans hit that signature pace that we saw in Game 1 and established themselves a lesser lead here in Game 2. I believe it was 7,500 going into that very last team fight, and they were able to crush the Bolts around the Fire Giant and immediately transition it into a Game 3 situation. And I think it really was just the Leviathans playing with a lot more comfort this time around. It just felt like their team composition was a little bit easier to execute on. Zapman in particular has a much better performance here in Game 2, actually finding a couple of solo kills, not necessarily up against Barracuda, sometimes up against the jungler, inside of the jungle. From there, the Leviathans able to transition that into exactly this.
Yeah, there were a couple of good picks from Lasbar on the other side that slowed down the Leviathans a little bit, but it didn't seem to take enough charge. They were finding way too many fights back in their favor. I even heard Aggro joke towards Shinto saying, well, hey, if things aren't going your way, just lock in Merlin, right? And Shinto agreed heartily with that statement. Apparently it works out pretty well for him. We'll see how much damage he was able to put up. 1, 3, and 2. Not the most spectacular slash line. Actually, Zapman that maybe catches my eye more than anybody in this, because there were so many engagements where it'd be like back and forth, even 4v4, and then Zap would just show up and somebody's health bar was erased, and you're just like, damn, dude, calm down just a little bit. He puts up 8,000 damage, and granted, given the length of the game, that's going to be a hefty chunk. Only, well, actually 2k down from where Barra was. But you can see it being a lot more effective damage. Same thing there for Shinto, and you had highlighted Panatom earlier.
Yeah, the damage output might not be the most impressive from the Leviathans, but when they did decide to apply that damage, somebody fell on the Olympus Bolts, and maybe the Olympus Bolts given the opportunity to find a little bit more damage in their own right, because the Leviathans went for a slightly more healing composition, had some more sustain inside of these fights, were playing a little bit more willy-nilly with their HP bars, but now we're in a Game 3 situation, right, Gord? On a land day, a full land day, by the way. This isn't the only land set we've got here today. I can't think of a better way to start it.
Yeah, exactly what you would want to see. 3 games between the Bolts and the Leviathans, and pretty much the way it's gone a majority of the year. I think they have 1-2-0 between the two of them, and that was the very first week of Season 8. Leviathans were able to close that one out 2-0, and since then, it has been 2-1s or 3-1s, depending on where they were playing. Nobody's been shut out since May, April, a long time for these players, as it is going to be the Terra first ban. Bolts will be the first pick team once again. So you have to remember last time around, their first 3 were Terra, Yamoja. They're already on track to keep those going. Khepri was the third one. On the other side, it was Odin, Tiamat, Serket when Leviathans were in this. But it seems like they're learning their lesson from Game 1 and getting rid of the Geb.
It's just so annoying to deal with the Gebs, the Sylvanas, and the Khepris of the world. Those are the 3 tried and true, like standard OG Smite Guardians that are just there to make sure that you're having a harder time playing against your opposition. Geb with the Stone Shield, Khepri with the Scarab's Blessing, all just make it so much harder for you to finish off these kills, essentially forcing you to kill them twice. And I guess the Bolts didn't want to have to deal with it themselves either, removing Khepri from the playing field, and Leviathan strike back by taking Morgan Le Fay out of the play field. Tiamat, though, finally works her way through, gets first picked overall by the Bolts.
Yeah, I'm wondering about this. The Morgan gets banned over Tiamat here, both picks that are deadly for Venenu, but the Tiamat feels like it's easier to deal with maybe in the early game where the Leviathans have already been getting a lot of their pressure. Is that a switch up that you're okay with, or does that make you a little nervous?
I'd argue that the Morrigan and Tiamat are similarly weak inside of the early game. Morrigan a little bit easier to shut down, I'd say, just because you don't have that leap to escape out of these situations. Sure, you got a little bit of a stealth, but Tiamat still has just like more abilities than most mages, as well as a leap.
Just inherently.
Yeah,
she just does more,
She's got more dudes, too. She just spawns up some people, so it makes it a little bit harder to shut down
You want to fight me? I got a crew.
Yeah, Tiamat's always jumping, man. It's never a fair fight when she's around, but when you leave Tiamat up, you got to expect that the other side's also going to find some value picks, and one that we had thought would be highly contended within the set, Turquette, getting locked in for the Leviathans. With Ardio headed towards Soul Lane more than likely, I think Turquette, although can go into the jungle, especially with these 8.9 assassin changes, maybe a little bit more slated for the support role here.
Has been a very popular pick for the supports in this matchup, just in general. That's what we saw at the very beginning of the day between the two of them. Turquette is, admittedly, I would hedge my bets towards Rongu, but you never know. Panatom does like this pick just as well. And it feels good. No matter who plays it, it feels good into the Tiamat. So it's just a win-win in the draft, it feels like, for the Leviathans. Alongside that, Ardio, again, not the most successful god that we have seen who has conquered what has been, I believe, almost 100% pick ban. And no, it has been 100% pick ban throughout the last couple of weeks. But she's still doing a lot, and it's making it real difficult to just exist against her.
Yeah, Ardio is just so annoying to deal with. And
hey, you want some healing?
Specifically against Tiamat, Ardio kind of removes your ability to use your shift stance, right? You only really have access to the one phase as long as that cripple field is around you. And if Ardio's on the map and she's got priority targets in front of her, she's probably going to be on top of this Tiamat more often than not. So what do the Bolts do to try and help out with that situation? Draft themselves a iron wall of a front line. Sylvanas and Cerberus, both with large circular AoE CC abilities, should be able to create some space up against this Ardio. Sylvanas with a knock-up, Cerberus with the Stygian Torment, both going to be able to reposition this Ardio, as she does not have any inherent CC immunity inside of her kit, which should, again, make it a little bit easier for Ven to perform on Tia.
Now this is a mid laner locked in, Raijin, for the Leviathans, that for a long time was an undefeated mid laner. This is still a hefty, like, 70 to 80% win rate overall, I believe, for Shinto. So something you gotta be a little nervous about with how well this has performed for them. Alongside that, Turquette makes things shift heavily in their favor. But Ardio's matchup versus Cerberus specifically is one that has not really been going her way the last couple of weeks. If I remember correctly, the few times we've seen it, Cerberus has been able to come out on top each time. And as you'd said, with an iron wall, Sylvanas up there, the Tiamat, who can kind of survive a lot throughout the duration of the game, it feels like the Bolts are just going to be difficult to tack kills onto.
Yeah, but as of right now, the Bolts are really looking at, as far as pressure is concerned, just the Sylvanas in the support role should be able to kind of sway the lane slightly in your favor. Having AoE audios from your Guardian feels pretty nice, but now you got to start looking towards these Hunters, or if you're the Bolts, you're looking towards Junglers. Seems like they agree with us on the desk that this Turquette is likely headed into that support role, as they have banned out Gilgamesh already. Now following it up with a Susano saying, all right, Panatom, you have to go a little bit deeper inside of your God pool. But I want to see some relatively aggressive picks now to round out this Bolts draft. I mean, I think Ul is still out there. Kind of wild that he's still available right now and should help out a lot with the Sylvanas inside a lane. And when I was talking about aggressive picks, I was referring to the Bolts, but the Leviathans take one in their own right. Erlang Shen locked in, and look, man, I know that we're really excited about 8.9. Assassin's finally going to get played again. You want to go towards those, but Erlang Shen with Mannequin Scepter in its current state, I'd argue, is still incredibly strong. In my mind, still like a top 5 jungle pick.
And you have to look at it, right? You've got 2 taunts now, like Turquette taunt being available, but also her engage and her ult. You've got Raijin, you've got Erlang. That 3v3 in mid just feels deadly on the side of the Leviathans, but you've got Ardio locked in alongside it, makes it the front line seem even stronger on their side. But it's the Raven and the Hachiman Mifflin that it gets locked in at the very end. This was taken by Zap last time. He's still waiting for his pick. Ullr's still available, and yeah, there it is. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, this was one that Zap just, again, it felt like had a very explosive performance. Same thing can be said for the Ullr, not necessarily in Game 1 this set, but throughout the duration, at least the games we've seen the Leviathans run with it, it's been pretty kind to them in the Hunter matchup.
Yeah, I think Uller into Hachiman as well is going to be a little bit easier to perform on than an Uller into Scotty. Hachiman has similar fight potential, but maybe a little bit less than Scotty. His damage output is a little bit harder to apply. The Heavenly Banner as poke, although nice, is pretty easy to avoid. And if he's utilizing the banner itself, the aura it leaves on the ground makes it a little bit easier for you to land your own auto attacks as Ull up against this god. And pretty often, I think we're going to see this Hachiman just utilizing his own ultimate to escape away after taking a ton of poke from this Uller. That said, though, the Leviathans kind of reprising their strategy from Game 1. This is a lot of early game aggression across the board. Serket out of support, obviously going to be very aggressive. Erlang Shen hits the ground running more often than not. We've seen layers in his last 4 games on Erlang Shen get first blood on first wave. So expect great things from the Leviathans jungler, and we know that Raijin has great early game potential. We know that Artio can be a lane bully. I think that the Leviathans could very well run away with this one quickly.
This is a really weird thing to think about, but I'm pretty sure this is one of the first times, if not the first time or few times, that Zap has gotten a last pick on his team. I just feel like they almost always pick him at the lowest they will typically go is 4th pick to grab Zapman something. Maybe it's happened a couple of times elsewhere in this year, and maybe when Yarkor was playing carry for them, they might have done it, but it just feels weird to see that all the way down there. The Raven catches my eye here, because you had mentioned how Erlang Shen is dominant, and that's just the way it is. Raven has been picked up a lot this year, and hasn't really stood by the amounts that he's been locked in. Does he have a good chance here? Has Lasbra been playing enough here specifically for the Raven to be successful?
I think so. Raven's got a different power curve than some of these other bruiser-style assassins. Used to be a warrior, Erlang Shen a warrior. Erlang Shen going to hit the ground running a little bit more quickly, whereas Raven needs 2 or 3 items before he really finds his fight potential. But once he gets there, this god is hard to stop from aggressing onto your backline because of the overhead kick. He's got great mobility thanks to his ultimate. The lockdown is good as well with a root in the slow. So I think Raven is a pick that we'll see a little bit more often. So far here in Phase 3, seen it 4 times with a 50% win rate. I think he can keep it up.
Well, it's a high set as of right now. Someone's going to win right here in game number 3.
Will we see a similar lead that we have in the first 2 games? Well, that's, I guess, up to the Bolts to decide if they want to fall behind early. It's game number 3. It's J-Mac and Aggro and Doug bringing you the final game of this best-of-3 set. The Olympus Bolts looking to hit the ground running in this one. They do have a Sylvanas Hachiman to try and get some of that dual lane going for themselves. Try and pair up against Rongyu on this Serket and Zapman Uller.
I would say that these are the 2 most aggressive drafts we've seen so far in this set. I mean, Erlong with mannequins always going to be pretty aggressive. Serket support, Uller dual lane, that is a ton of kill pressure, but you've got good wave clear out of the other end for the Bolts. It has been a lot of Geb and lower pressure gods for the Bolts. Not so much this time around. You've got a Raven for Lasbro, which is by far the earliest game jungler that he's really played well. I think that I'm interested to see what the pace of this game is going to be, because these picks tell me it should be much faster, but I don't know. Something tells me it won't be that way.
Yeah, history's been showing it might be going a little bit longer. Though Game 2 did end just shy of 23, the Leviathans didn't want anything to do with late game against the Bolts, so they took their early game and they were able to make some nice strides. Let's see if they repeat that performance here in Game 2. They already have a very slight 100 gold lead. That's nothing really all that big here at the 1 minute mark. You know, that's the wave to wave basically. You know, is the jungler sharing by wave yet? Yes or no? Lasbra and Venenu will team up here to clear out the mid wave, and mid-Harpies on the left side do go the way. The Leviathans a taunt by Rongyu against Jake, but not much more beyond there. A leap in from Zapman. Thought he was going to go for an aggressive play against the 2, but instead it'll just be the Harpy that the Leviathans go for.
Almost disaster there for the Bolts. If Rongyu's second Cobra's Kiss had landed on Barra as he was starting up that dash, that could have been a really big play for them.
Venenu knocked up in the turtle form, rooted in place, and taken right down. Panatom strikes early in mid lane and gets a kill on the board for Leviathans. This time, surprisingly, not in the duo, but that's not to say there's no action here in the duo lane. Awesome Jake taunts it in, but Lasbra is the one who rotates over first this time. He'll pick up Zapman and maybe Rongyu as a nice extra prize for the Bolts. Rongyu is just a little too mobile. Lasbra needs one more hit, but Barra grabs it from range. The basic attack from the Hunter puts him a double kill.
Finally, this duo lane for the Bolts is like, all right, fellas, we are sick and tired of getting killed by Panatom on these rotations. Lasbra, maybe you rotate over? And it's perfect timing, too, because Zap had just jumped in. Not enough info because Panatom and Shinto are so focused on their early kill. and understandably so, but they lose track of the jungler a little bit. And that timing is very common for the jungler to go to the right-hand side and pick up their back harpies off respawn. That's a very common sort of timing to go farm. But Lasbra, that's the best way to catch these players off guard, is that they've played so much Smite, they track jungle so well, you have to make a sacrifice and take a risk in order to gank a lane early, and that one pays off beautifully, right on time for him to come in and punish Zap for jumping in.
I mean, it's wild to think it took 3 games for Lasbra to go back to his signature, you know, kind of level 2-3 cringe ganking duo lane, but he pulls it out here in game 3, finally gets the bolts on the board early compared to the last couple of games where they've had to wait a little bit longer. Haddix will be knocked up by Panatom. The root comes through from Yarkor. Won't root anybody in place. The overhead kick from Lasbra, maybe a little bit early. The pin locks him in, but he's able to get back under the tier 1 tower. Haddix will walk forward, but he's only level 4. Doesn't have that ultimate available to him just yet.
As expected, the Artie or Long Shen is going to win all fights. It's really not a hard math equation to figure out. Those two gods just too good at this stage of the game. So wouldn't be surprised to see the Leviathans continue to try and put pressure over there, especially now that the dual lane has gotten off to such a good start. Barra should be able to finish his Crusher, assuming he goes the same build as Zapman, significantly earlier than Zap will be able to finish Jotuns. Even with Jotuns being cheaper, those 2 kills should be enough of a difference maker.
Venenu going to give up that 1 minion. He saw Shinto maybe rotating in. Shinto at full health, level 6, has tier 2 of that restored artifact. Just a little bit more power online compared to Venenu. And with Venenu sitting just around half health, probably not the early fight that he wants to take up against a Raijin, especially a Raijin that has that ultimate available. So he'll give up mid-camp, and Shinto will finally pick that up when Panatom rotates over. Venenu just a little stuck under this tower waiting for a chance to go back to base, and he'll finally get that opportunity, go back and start picking up some of his first items.
The very least, his beads are still up, or back up, I should say, after that first blood from the Leviathan. So only 1 death there in the mid lane after that play. Really, you know, it seems like only 1 death for first blood, but that is kind of the case with Erlong Shen. It's just one of those gods that if he decides he's going to use enough to kill you, especially in the early, he will. And you are left with few options of your own. You kind of need team help in order to prevent that from happening. You know, a root from Jake or a knock-up, a root from Lasbra, those sorts of things are what's required to stay alive whenever Panatom starts to get on top of you with that blink.
I mean, it's one of those things against Erlong. You think you just got away from, all right, I beads away from the turtle, no big deal. Oh, wait, there's pin. Well, now I'm stuck in place. My leap is down or my dash is down, so now I just kind of have to sit here and wait and hope he doesn't kill me, but usually it's not the case. It usually is a nice kill. Haddix used his ultimate. It's immediately countered by Rongu. It'll be a leap in and a blink from the jungler. Haddix has nowhere to go, and he's put right down. Lasbra up, down's right in place. Arkor and Panatom take a good chunk, but Panatom's heal from the ultimate comes back on, gives him a nice chunk back.
Right, just like that. It's, again, the Leviathans being nice and aggressive. Haddix probably has to try and save the ultimate for the Circuit ult. I don't think that when you just try and ult right away, and then she puts the ult on you and then can jump away or jump past you and try and Cobra's kiss you back, you're just low on options from that position. So maybe a bit of mis-sequencing on the beads versus ult discussion there from Haddix, but I don't think that he had a whole lot of options regardless of what he did. That's what Circuit does. She locks you down, she kills you early. Her base damage is enough to actually make you have to use relics for just her. But when it's not just her, you're probably going to bite it.
I mean, when you're staring down the barrel of 4 Leviathans on the opposite side, ultimate probably the quick call in your mind, you know, big AoE ult, I got a bunch surrounding me, yeah, just go ahead and throw that one out. Doesn't prove fruitful for Haddix in this time around. It'll be 2-2 on the scoreboard, about 1,500 plus gold favor Leviathans, and this is the same thing that we've seen from them game 1 and game 2. Get this small early lead. Can Leviathans run with it like they did in game 2? Only time will tell.
Yeah, I think that this has kind of been the MO for them, is these early pressure games, and the only place where the Bolts really should theoretically have pressure is in duo. And Rongu instantly has left that lane and gone, all right, Zap, good luck, have fun. We're not going to be there because we think that you should be kind of dominating this lane either way, even with that early deficit.
Look at him.
I would say. Sitting there in mid, just waiting for a play to happen. Because Lasbra's really the one that is there to keep pressure up elsewhere on the map. It's duo where they should have pressure and wherever Lasbra goes. But because Panatom has equally as much pressure and damage, it's difficult for Lazarus to make an easy impact.
Do they know he's there is the question. Well, maybe they'll find out. Rongyu gets exposed by Lazarus. He'll taunt it back in with the Deathbane, and then the ultimate throws him right into the clutches of Shinto, and that may not be enough to save his life. The last tick of the ultimate will be enough damage. Rongyu, all that patience pays off, and they take down the jungler.
Trap sprung by the support, and just like that, it's another kill for the Leviathans, and look at where he's going next, heading right back over to solo.
And immediately looking for Haddix, and knock up from Panatom is good. Haddix will throw him under the tower and stun him in place, but he's surrounded by 3 again. And another kill for the Leviathans, taking down Haddix. No beads were available in the ult. A little premature to help him out.
Jake tries to find Shinto in mid, and he'll pull him to no avail. It doesn't do a whole lot from that position. I like Shinto's aggressive posturing, because even if he gets attacked, Panatom was fairly close by, Rongyu was fairly close by. He can probably jump to them and use Taiko drums to turn that fight around. So good job by the Bolts not taking that bait at the very least, because I think Shinto was trying to look nice and juicy there on bottom right, and just not a big commitment from the Bolts, who again are just not able to keep pace with the Leviathans in these early stages. Leviathans have been the aggressors basically everywhere.
Lasbro walks up to throw a ward, and maybe Panatom and Hardcore were hoping they would walk over towards their side of the map where they were standing. Lasbro will start the Scorpion, but the ward gives him away. He'll back off of it instantly. And again, Rongyu just going, this is the classic Rongyu play. He loves sitting here in this mid lane. Usually it's in the lane that he's sitting and waiting for somebody, but I guess he was able to sneak by. Nobody had caught him on a ward, clearly, because Lasbro just walks right by him and goes, oh, it's like one of those Snake moments. A little exclamation mark pops up over his head, like, uh-oh, somebody spotted me. I got to go ahead and get that fight. But pays off for Rongyu. He's really the only, I think he's really the only one who's actually doing this strat of just sitting there. But every single time he does it, I'm sitting there going, okay, surely he's losing out on some farm for this. Surely he's not going to get any major benefit. But look where he's standing right now, level 8 to level 7 out of Jake, and not falling behind any.
No, he's picking his spots well for it. I mean, he does it whenever there's not a whole lot else going on that, you know, if he knows he's not sharing a rotation of back harpies and that his duo side buffs are down and they aren't looking for a play in solo, he just sits close enough in mid
there he goes,
to where he's going to be able to absorb some farm. Looks like he got pinged that time, so I wonder if the Bolts know he's there, but they won't know exactly where at the very least. And this gives him good information. You know, if he wants Shinto to solo those right side mid harpies anyways, what has he lost from doing this? And he's going to be here to soak mid wave anyways. It's a really good strategy.
Shinto's going to sit very far up and clear that wave out. Not sure how much that experience Rongyu actually got for how far back he was sitting, but he'll at least continue staying here. What we need to do is anytime he locks in this god, we need to have production make a timer for us. And as soon as they see him go stealth by one of these mid lanes, they start that timer. That way we can get a full grasp of just how much he has been sitting. At that time, looked around 20, 30 seconds, but he doesn't get anything from it, just a little bit of that mid lane farm soak with Shinto. He'll lead a nice little rune, taunt back against Jake. Deathbane misses. So Rongyu this time, stealth doesn't get him too much.
No, but you know, he's not losing a whole lot, so it's not the end of the world. The Leviathans keep the pace as expected. You know, very similar to the last 2 games. This time, though, it's not their mid 3v3 that's super far ahead, though Shinto does have a slight lead, as does Panatom, as does Rongyu. So slight leads for the 3v3. But it's really this solo lane that has the majority of the lead now for the Leviathans. How can Yarkor translate this lead on the RDO, and will Haddix be able to survive these next few ganks? Because look at his itemization. I mean, he is not in a good spot, certainly in comparison to just Yarkor, but even to the rest of the map. Everyone else getting pretty close to 2 complete items. Haddix still pretty far away.
Both of these hunters tired of these early ganks against them. They slammed a ward on either side of the middle of that map, so they knew when both Panatom, or when Lasbro made a rotation over and when Rongyu came over to that lane. So both Zapman and Barra will be just fine. They'll be left on their own little solo island of their own here in the dual lane, just kind of get that farm going. But it's been benefiting Zapman, about 11.5 up, starting up his Transcendence. Already has the Jotun's Wrath completed, so he's going to get a major power spike here in the next few minutes once he can get that item stacked up. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the map, it's a Breastplate of Valor pickup for both of these Guardians, but interesting enough, Hardcore has gone for the Warrior's Axe compared to the Vampiric Shroud out of Haddix, so a little bit more sustain out of Haddix, maybe just a little bit more poke pressure out of Hardcore.
Exactly, and it's more about the fact that there's going to be some easy jungle pressure coming from Panatom and from Rongyu, and having that physical protection from Vamp Shroud, even though it isn't great against your lane opponent as a fellow Guardian. it's good against the support and the jungler, whereas on the other side, it's only good against the jungler. So Jake's magical damage may be making the difference for Yarkor's decision.
Beads burned on Zapman by Awesome Jake. That pull was just enough to scare Zapman to having to use that relic. So it'll be down for about 2.5 minutes on the Hunter, but if we've seen anything from these dual lanes, they probably will be fine with holding that relic on cooldown. He's not really going for too many aggressive fights. He's got a lot of ward control. It's maybe Lasbra, who needs some wards and needs a little bit of help. He'll lose half his health in the 1v1 against Panatom, but no relics and no ultimates burned aside from Lasbra. Had to use it to get out of there.
And this is guaranteeing pressure again on this right-hand side. It means Haddix has to back up, give respect to a potential rotation, lose a little bit of extra farm on this right-hand side. And I think that overall, that's probably a win for the Bolts. Blink is just a longer cooldown than Mystic Rush. So in terms of raw numbers, it should be good for them, but still more farm that goes Leviathan's way.
Wrong you goes for the taunt against Jake, but he won't pull him back towards him. Instead, Jake gets turned towards Venenu, and that'll be just enough distance to walk away from the Leviathan. Still sitting at about 4,000 gold in their favor, so it's only been a 4-kill game. Maybe they can try and add something here. The Bolts go aggressive against Zapman, but he'll quickly leap away. That gives Barracuda a little bit of chance here to get some farm in this dual lane, but Wrong you rotates over, and that should guarantee that Zapman gets to continue farming despite being so low in his mana pool.
Like to play, though, from Lasbra, because that was so low on mana, you'd think, okay, maybe he won't have enough for his jump. The thing about Transcendence and other mana-increasing items is that it looks like a little bit of mana, but because his mana pool is expanded by so much, it's a lot more than you think. So Zap's still able to jump away, but Lasbra tries to make the aggressive play, nearly gets the purple. Doesn't, but have no problem with the idea.
Yeah, he's got more mana than health right now. 2,080 mana, only 1,700 health for the Hunter. So yeah, you look at that on almost any other role, any other guy, and you're going, oh yeah, he's got what? Maybe like 50, 60. He might have enough for one there. Zapman's sitting on probably 3 skills worth of mana to be able to, at his expense. So he'll go back to base. He'll pick up a Brawler's Beat Stick, and then his second relic, the Aegis, locked in. On the other side of the board, Barracuda still hasn't been able to pick up his third item, nor has he picked up his other relic.
Interesting that Zap's the one to pick up the Brawlers. I mean, Panatom, you rarely see a Brawlers for an Erlong Shen because he's only proccing it with 2 abilities, the 2 and the 3, so when he wants anti-heal, most of the time it's Toxic Blade.
Wrong Yuga dives in aggressively, finds Venenu with the ultimate, a quick leap out from him, and a pull against Shinto gets the beads from the mid laner. That'll be a quick disengage for the Leviathans. They got what they want out of the Bolts, at least. The Bolts able to strip away 1 set of defensive relics from the Leviathans.
And it didn't cost them anything at all. No beads used, no ultimates used, really good patience by the Bolts in that situation. I liked the idea from the Leviathans, just didn't work.
Shinto aggressively going up with the Taiko drums. He's not going to find anybody wrong. Use the one in danger, and ultimate from Haddix will throw him right back into the clutches, and the EI Jutsu from Barra takes him down. Hardcore in the middle of all, and Jake trying to find an escape path. Panatom gets a big heal with the ultimate, but Haddix gets an even bigger shot of damage with that spit. Shinto falls down, and the Gold Fury could go the way of the Bolts here right after this fight.
So Jake gets a couple of assists that fight, but it doesn't really tell how that whole fight really goes their way because of him. Because Shinto uses beads, top left, off his pull, and then he walks around the corner again, and Shinto's so scared of this pull in, uses Taiko drums in order to not get pulled again, and then he walks into melee range for it.
Pyromancer started. Panatom low, no ultimate. Leviathans get the Pyro, but they lose their jungler and maybe lose Hardcore. He's looking for a chance to get that dash out, but he is surrounded by 4. How tanky is this bear is a good indication. The root holds him in place. The knockup takes him out of the dash entirely, but he's still alive, and maybe Wrongu could turn this around. An ultimate from Haddix will make sure to run him back in, and Wrongu now stuck in the middle of everybody. Venenu picks it up. It's a 3 swing for that Pyromancer.
Huge plays by the Olympus Bolts, just punishing the Leviathans for their oversteps, and they do it again. Vera's looking to find Zap.
Vera gets stunned. It's the 1v1 of the Hunters you don't get to see. The Aussie comes in, but it's not powerful enough. Zapman doesn't need lifesteal. All he's got are his abilities and basics, and that'll be enough to get the 1v1 trade against Barra.
And that's big for the Leviathans because they needed something to go their way. They really were starting to lose control of this game pretty quickly, and see that pretty massive spike back towards the Leviathans' favor. That was that kill by Zap onto Barra, and the ability to farm everywhere else on the map, of course, for the XP. But still, the Leviathans in a good position, still in the lead, But a pretty sloppy engagement there, and Jake doing a lot of work on this Sylvanas, just putting pressure on Shinto, rooting Yarkor as he dashed away, making sure that they can keep him locked in place. I think overall the Bolts, again, behind, as per usual, but probably feeling pretty confident right now.
Not the best fight for Bear to take either. He, on that death going back to base is when he picked up this Wind Demon and this Tier 1 Morningstar. So he was an entire item behind Zapman and a level behind Zapman. Decided to take that fight, and well, he found out what happens with an Uller with a lead as far as the items are concerned goes, and even in that experience of Zapman winning that trade, he goes back, picks up a full Titan's Bane. So right now, Barracuda is still sitting almost a full level behind Zapman.
Definitely not. He's more than just a full level. I mean, he's down.
Or a full item, I should say.
Yeah, full item and 2.5 levels, 3 levels for Zap in the lead. Barra was 3-0 going into that as well. So definitely those deaths in the mid game are the most punishing because waves scale up in value as the game goes on. Every 3 minutes they're worth more, and so these mid game waves are worth a lot. So if you lose, you die, you miss 3 waves, enemy ADC gets 3 waves. Not only do they get the golden experience from killing you, but then all of that extra farm after.
Barracuda chased down by Zap and Panatom. He'll get the purple buff, and not much further chase. And now might be turning over towards Jake. He gets pinned in place, forced to use the ultimate. But is that ult enough to save his life? Wrong Yu goes in with one of his own. That will be a dead tree. Jake goes down. Haddix picks up 2 with the ultimate. It's Wrong Yu and Shinto who are low. A Thunder Crash out, but Haddix is willing to chase out that mid laner, but he takes a ton of damage right back in return. Now it's Haddix who's on the run. One more shot from Panatom was all that they need, but it's Hardcore who's just bullying Lasbro, the 1v3, going the way of the Guardian. Hardcore picks him up in the middle of all, and Zapman rotates over. Hardcore still alive. Zapman picks up the double. Can he get the triple kill? The light steal from Farah, not quite enough. Zapman takes him down.
What a play from the former ADC for the Leviathans and the current ADC for the Leviathans. Yarkor just keeps taking these outnumbered fights, and the Bear Shark himself just takes it down onto the Bolts, who just get too spread out. Jake just gets insta-killed. Sylvanas, no matter how good he gets, is always going to have that problem. Just gets pinned and insta-killed by the Leviathans, and the Bolts just get too separated. Lasbro not able to do nearly enough damage on the back end to match what they needed. Haddix ends up getting chased out and killed, and then Zap's there, the only one. No other Leviathan came to help Yarkor, by the way. They all were like, oh, 1v3, he's dead. Zapman, a man who's done plenty of 1v3s in his time, goes, no, buddy, I got you. I'm coming in.
He shows a little bit of sympathy. I've been in this predicament myself. I'll come and help you out. And look how far Zapman rotates for this fight. He gets the kill against Haddix on the top side. Hardcore is still fighting against everybody else. He doesn't even get the kill against Lasbro. I thought that it was going to be his way. It does go to Lasbro, but Zapman rotates in and has perfect body blocks for him. Normally it's the frontliner who body blocks for your carry, but Zapman holding it up, and Hardcore with just enough healing in the kit, they stay alive. Zapman picks up the trip, and the Leviathans swing the momentum of the game right back in their favor.
Lasbro's in trouble here. No beats. He's got to use Mystic Rush to get out.
He's trying to get out, but that knockup from Panatom is just too much. Now he's rooted as soon as he gets out of there, and a taunt back in from Panatom, slowed down and shot down. Panatom gets another kill. Jake under the tier 2 tower in a little bit of danger, but he'll manage to squeak on by, and Zapman now level 20 with a Bumba Spear. He'll go ahead and just start shredding through these towers.
Zap just looking too good on the Zooler, man. I mean, I don't know how you stop him now. This backline for the Bolts is so far behind in experience and in itemization that I think that Shinto and Zapman should be able to just run through these team fights.
So split up the map here as a 3-2. 2 on the mid lane and now 3 over towards the left side. Panatom rotates over. Jake gets taunted in. The Phoenix is definitely the one who is losing this fight, only down to about 5% health. Just takes maybe one more auto from Zapman. An ult in from Haddix, and may have been the ult that ends his life. Panatom takes him down. Jake gets taunted back in by the Tycho drums, and Zapman finishes the job. Barracuda tries to fly as far away as he can on that horse. It'll be just far enough to get him to the fountain, but the Leviathans have done the damage. Left side bird is gone, and the mid Phoenix, their next target.
Shouldn't be an end quite yet, though, from the Leviathans. I mean, 25 seconds on Jake. Maybe Leviathans can push in this mid Phoenix and then go straight for Titan.
Rongyu is looking for the fight. He jumps in, but Ben and Bear are so far back, he can't find anybody with it. So 2 Phoenixes for the Leviathans, and immediately they'll turn back away. They got plenty of time left on this Fire Giant power play, just under 2 minutes, and plenty of opportunity on the map. 2 more towers, an Oni Fury up. You see Zapman and Panatom. That will be their primary focus. Our quick rotation over to the objective to add more gold, but most importantly, add more pressure on the map for the Leviathans.
All right, I know a lot of the pro players don't like when it's an Ullr meta, but man, that god is so fun to watch whenever they start rolling. I mean, just so much damage, so much playmaking potential, and that's exactly what Zap has brought, man. 5, 1, and 2, top player damage in the entire game, as expected for the Zuler.
That man will be able to run away. They get the Oni Fury, so 2 towers still left, saying that is the final targets for the Leviathans if they want to grab that 3rd Phoenix. I'm actually surprised that both those towers are still standing up on that right side. Haddix has been quite bullied on this right side of the map. 1, 4, and 4 on the Cerberus. He's been getting some nice ultimates, but in that last little play, he dives in, hits, what, 4 or 5 with the ult, and all of them just go, all right, that's cool. Thanks for hand-delivering yourself to your own grave. They put him down, turn that fight in their favor, and now it's a Draugr as their consolation prize for the Bolts after losing 2 Phoenixes.
I don't think they're going to be able to step up and really start to shove these waves out super well, because now it's Oni fire waves coming down mid, and this left-hand side Tiamat minions never going to be enough to handle those. Only 30 seconds left on fire, so Leviathans, by the time they reach this right side, Phoenix won't have it anymore at the very least, but I still feel like they have all the pressure in the world.
They got 20 seconds left on it. Can they make it work and take out this right side Phoenix? The Draugr buff is up, so we'll get a little bit of extra defense and a little extra damage coming from this Phoenix, but that man doesn't seem too keen on walking right in, waiting for one of those frontliners to jump in, or maybe they just wait out the Fire Giant buff and see how much more they can strip away from the Bolts. Fire minions, Fire Oni minions, I should say, pushing up that left side, and the Bolts are going to have to send somebody there to answer them, because these minions are the most powerful ones you can get in the game, and they can shred that Titan if you're not paying attention. Lasbra kind of half steps over towards it. Yarkor walks in for the Phoenix, and the Leviathans will take that prize. It's an ultimate out of Awesome Jake to respond in kind. It's the ultimate from Panatom. Wrong You rooted out. Quite a bit of damage from the mid laner. Wrong You goes down. Jake credited with the kills. That man quickly leaps out. Lasbra goes right in with the ultimate.
That's not going to be enough, and Shinto's damage will be Jake. Has no choice but to go and help the minions. Barra left all alone, and Zap's going to claim him.
Barra's going to go down. The minions do get cleared out, but the Leviathans are still here 4 strong with another wave that can go right in. Titan going all the way down, and all of that thanks to the help of those fire minions. A good pull from Jake, but not enough to save the day. The Leviathans come out in Game 3 swinging and close it in 24.
Look, the Leviathans came out and had 3 really good early games, 2 really good mid and then games. Just that first game kind of got away from them to some good plays by the Olympus Bolts, but I think the Leviathans have come out and shown that they are the team to beat right now. I don't think there's any doubt in many people's minds.
Yeah, sitting at the top of the charts as far as the standings are concerned, was 3-0, now will be 4-0. After today, a good performance by the Leviathans, and they show why they want to be at that first seed. And with performances like that, I'm absolutely not surprised that they're at the top of the standings. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back to the desk to finish breaking down that set.
That's right, shop.smiteproleague.com. But this time it's not just joggers and mouse pads that I'm talking about, Mifflin. This time I'm talking about the other stuff, the good stuff, the stuff we like, and the stuff that just says Smite Pro League. If you don't necessarily have a favorite team that you want to root for, or you just really like the logo, which personally I do, these are very comfortable hoodies, shirts, we've got hats, we've got beanies. I remember that one off the top of my head. Toboggans with the little fluff ball on the top.
Yeah, the beanies with the ball, not the sled.
Yeah. Hold on, wait, Avrid, if you're listening, winter's coming up.
Yeah, Red Rum. Wait, that's not the sled.
What?
There's like a sled. It's like a famous sled. Don't leave me. Don't just laugh and look at me. It's got a name.
The only thing.
Oh no.
Nope, I'm missing it.
All
Shop.smiteproleague.com. That's exactly what you need to go to in order to get all of that and beautiful merchandise. That's Mifflin. I'm Gormizer. And the Leviathans take this one out 2-1. A little bit of a fumble there in game number 1 after a pretty big lead for them, but they then get a good lead in game 2 and close it out, and then they do the same thing in game 3. And again, a couple of bumps on the road, Mifflin. He's Googling right now, not even listening.
Famous sled name. It didn't work.
Oh, yeah? What came up?
Just some popular names for, like, huskies.
I guess that makes sense.
Like Alaskan sled dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the most popular husky name?
Ace.
Oh, well, that's not.
I think it's just alphabetic.
Look, Ace is the bat hound, okay? Hold on.
I'm closing
Pause.
it. All right, we got Smite Pro to do.
Yeah, break it down, dude. I did the whole thing I was supposed to do.
Anyway.
You're supposed to talk about it now.
Yeah, the Leviathans had an incredibly strong early game
part.
composition yet again, and I'd argue they did so all 3 of these games, but it gets away from them inside of game 1. Game 3, though, not nearly as easy for the Olympus Bolts for them to get away with, and the Leviathans able to push their lead. I think Panatom in particular has an incredibly strong performance on this Erlang Shen, and look, man, I'm not going to toot my own horn too much here, but Erlang Shen is good. I don't know why these junglers are still ignoring this pick. Glad to see that not only is it Layers, but also Panatom able to pull this one out. And you know who else has a great performance? This guy, Zatman.
And this was insane and it wasn't even this part of it, although this was really, really fun to watch. Just getting the I don't even know if you can call it the pure 1v1. I guess it is still a pure 1v1.
I'd give it to him.
Zap had already killed 2 people in the process. I mean, that play between him and Hardcore was just insane to watch together. And it just feels like, again, everything lined up for them. Really good taunts. You had really good setup from both the Erlang Shen and the Circuit here from Rong Yu. And Zapman just got to have fun late game. Same thing for Shinto. They just got to let their damage unleash. And it kind of reflects here in the KDAs.
Don't you have a spreadsheet for like all the Hunter 1v1s where you just keep track of those? You're going to mark that one down?
The 1v1s?
Yeah, I think so, don't you? Like the solo kills?
No. Whenever I need solo kills, I just ask Zayden and I say, hey, any kill, and he pulls up specifically kills that gave no assists.
Huh.
So that I don't keep track of that one. I keep track of Winions, 7 this year.
All right.
Most Fire Giants in a single game, 8. For some reason, I have that listed twice.
Well,
so there you go.
So nice you had to do it twice, right? Now we get a little bit of a look at how the match actually panned out and take a peek at these damage numbers across the board. Zatman putting out 15,000, closer to 16,000. A little bit of parity between him and Barracuda, but the rest of the squad does a little bit more. Yarkor puts out 3,000 more than his opposition, and the Leviathans definitely benefiting from the space he created.
Yeah, I think that RDO, again, something that I was kind of doubting, just the way that we've seen it played. We've seen so many bans go its way, and then each time it's gotten through, it is just lost. But it had a really, really good performance here alongside the Circuit. In fact, we've got Rong Yu standing by for an interview after that set.
Yeah, we got Rong Yu here. A big win for Leviathans here against the Bolts. Puts you guys now to 4-0 in the standings. I just got to ask, you guys are winning these early games all 3 times, and the Bolts are just refusing to fight against you. What's kind of the minds? You guys are going, please, come on, just fight us.
Yeah, I feel like the first game we just didn't play smart. We just tried to end as soon as possible, and we just took bad fights. But then we realized that they weren't fighting at all, and we just have to play smart. And yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what goes in your mind when you're playing these Circuit games and you're just sitting either in the middle of the lane or in that one instance you're sitting in the jungle. What goes through your mind when you're just sitting there waiting?
Well, with Shinto, it's just like, Shinto, be near, or like, guys, let's group. It's just like a meme now. Because like when it's go like, well, because when Ramana died, someone was like, oh, the Ronnie special, and I was like, yeah, the Ronnie special.
I swear we're gonna have to get production to get a timer on you, because I swear every time you play Circuit, it's just a waiting game. Apparently, according to production, what they're telling me, 2 minutes and 20 seconds of that game you sat still. That is 2 whole human minutes you literally sat there. I'm not gonna say doing nothing. You were soaking some farm.
I was giving vision.
Yeah, you were able to get some big ones there. Look, you're 4-0, getting ready to head into group stages. How important are the last of these matches so you can try and secure that first seed?
We're just trying to play the basics SMITE now, but like we're not trying to show a lot of stuff for playoffs, so we'll see.
Well, you're looking good so far, and congratulations on your win. I'll let you get back to the team to celebrate, and we're going to throw it right back over to the desk.
All right. I mean, they do exactly what they need to. 4-0 right now for the Leviathans. Doesn't matter how many minutes you spend stealth in game, although I wish that's something I want to start keeping track of maybe for like the whole year. Who spends the most time invisible in the game? That's a fun one. That's going to Mifflin. That's going to be the next bonus fact on Waiting Room. No one's going to tell me now. I can guarantee
spent the most time invisible throughout the year?
Yeah.
That's your bonus fact?
That's not me. I don't get to choose that. Someone's going to pull that against me now.
Nice. Well, here's my bonus fact. I was talking about Rosebud earlier. That's Citizen Kane.
Okay. I thought I was thinking you meant like the Red Ryder, like the BB gun in the Christmas Story.
I don't even
You
know.
said Red Rum, and so you've never seen Christmas Story.
No.
All right, we're going to have a talk a little bit later. Okay, we're going to look at the schedule as of right now to see how the rest of the week's going to shake out. We just watched the Leviathans take on the Bolts. Next week, the Leviathans will have to take on the Warriors and the Titans to see if they can continue their undefeated streak. But that was the only set that they play this week. Dragons and the Scarabs are going to be coming up just after this, and you'll never guess where it is, Mifflin. It's in the studio.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah,
you didn't even give me a chance to guess.
Well, yeah, because I said you would never guess. I'm not going to give you the chance.
Because I won't let you.
And, of course, they're going to be setting up. As of right now, they were hanging out in the break room watching the game. I heard a lot of claps when the Uller Zap 1v1 or the Bear Zap 1v1 was going on as they were watching it. A very highly contested match. And then, of course, more matches tomorrow. Take a peek at the standings. You can see the Bolts now at 3-2, just behind the Tartarus Titans. Top two in this round robin does matter a ton. You get to choose your opponent's group mates if you are in the top two. So right now, the Leviathans sitting pretty, admittedly also knowing someone's going to be targeting them, but being able to choose who they have on the other side as well is going to make things a very interesting matchup for them. Of course, everyone right now still fighting not just for that number 2 spot, but for number 1 to see if anyone will be able to take them on next week and take them down throughout all of this. With the Dragons and the Scarabs coming up next, Miff, what are your initial thoughts?
My thoughts are that the Scarabs have had a pretty decent matchup up against the Jade Dragons historically here, and the Solar Scarabs were talking some big game coming here into Phase 3, right? I think Bobby said he's aiming for at minimum top 5 or top 4 so far. Has been struggling a little bit, but certainly the Solar Scarabs have been looking better. But as of right now, as far as standings are concerned, the Jade Dragons looking to push themselves a little bit further up, and the Solar Scarabs trying their best to play spoiler.
Yeah, still looking for their first win, and very similar to where they were in Phase 1 when they actually got a win up against this Dragons team. We'll see if they're going to be able to recreate the magic and all that right after this.